Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend. Cinnamon Roll, what if with another fiction? What if Deku dead on his 8th birthday? Now, before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. If you want more videos like this, now let's get into the fanfic. The Mhataugu crossover. Tilde 0 tilde. In the Mustafu Wild Forest, a great tragedy, a terrible crime was unfolding. A group of older students had kidnapped a younger one and had brought him to a forgotten shrine in the deepest part of the wood, the one where hikers and suicidal persons would go. They had forced the child to hug a dead man, telling him that he would soon be with his kind. There, they had tied the greenette's hands behind his back, removed all of his clothes, and had etched slurs into his flesh. Homo, quirkless shit, useless. Just died already, you shitty doll. And by the end of it, he had stopped crying, he had stopped moving, and he would have stopped breathing if not for his stubborn streak and the unavoidable knowledge that a hero never gave up. Even when the sun was gone, painting the sky a pretty red, orange, and purple. Mom's coming soon. She'll look for me, and Kakin will tell her everything. He did it just to get away from the bad boys in our class. Yeah, that's it, Izuku thought as he tried not to breathe too hard, since his ribs were painful and crunchy. Ribs were not supposed to be crunchy. They left, spitting on him, one of them covering the dying boy in urine, telling him that he was worth even less than that. When they left, Izuku felt both relief and deep despair. And then Kakin. Kakin. His Kakin. I must have been really annoying today, he thought with renewed tears. The only thing he did was to give Kakin his forgotten bento. Auntie Mitsuki had asked him. But Kakin got mad again, putting him back in his place. Then a couple of older boys grabbed Izuku and did things to him. Awful things to him. Because he was quirkless, and a quirkless baby was only good at one thing and one thing only. They had told him that a flaw of nature had no right to reproduce, and that Kakin had to take care of the trash, or else he was no better than Deku. His body hurt. They had. Night fell. The air grew colder for the destroyed child. He was shivering, wondering if someone would ever bother finding him. Mama would. She would find me. Mama will never forget me, ever, the little boy thought with full faith. The sun disappeared. Evening was upon little Izuku, who could barely keep his eyes open as the pain, the cold and blood loss took its toll on the tiny 7-year-old. Unbeknownst to him, one of his violator's parents had a quirk that let him make people forget about things for 3 days. And when his frantic mother went to confront him after Bakugo had snitched, she forgot she even had a son. And thus, Izuku was forgotten, thrown away, discarded for a perceived weakness. But as night fell, the border between human and yokai thinned, and the mistress of Gap, Yamuna Dividasi, born under the name of Marable Hirns, and who used to be Yakumo Yukari, emerged between the border of night and day and the Hakure barrier. The location those demons had left Izuku to die was the outside world iteration of the Hakure Shrine, one that, for the past millennia, had always appeared as falling apart. In reality, her reality, the Hakure Shrine, at the top of the dragon's head and in the border itself, was striving. Well, it was less of a mere Shinto shrine, but a glorious temple dedicated to Goranga and Nityananda, and it had been taken care of by Ryumu Ravati and her descendants for centuries. You see, 2.5 centuries ago, Yukari brought in a Hare Krishna devotee, and this devotee, with his charm and good behavior, charmed everyone that was someone in Gensakayo. The result was that Gensakayo had turned from a slew of different religious paths to the one spiritual science called Bhakti Yoga. And Yamuna never wanted to go back to how things were before, and nothing will change her mind. Nothing at all. She addressed those who were beyond the fourth wall. Still, she could not sway them like this. It would be against the rules. And thus, she returned her attention to the dying sunshine laying naked and soiled on the floor of Ravati's divine shrine of the friend of the universe. Really, it was a sight for sore eyes. His body was pathetically small, and yet, not an inch of his had been spared. He was bruised and cut all over. Slurs and death wishes were carved in his flesh, and if the blood that still flowed between his legs and feeding the red spider lilies was anything to go by. The grand yokai grimaced. Those so-called humans dared to call her kin's demons and amoral creatures of sins. What a joke, she sneered. We are called immoral, baby-eating monsters, while those born with strong power harass, desecrate, and mutilate children seen as weaker than them. Oh sure, yokai could also be just as bad. But those yokai also tended to be eliminated quite quickly. Yamuna and Ravati would make sure of that. The blonde dressed in purple kneeled beside the boy, tethering between the border of life and death. His constellation of freckles a stark contrast against his paling bruised skin, his eyes dull, filled with pain and fear. And resignation. And yet, Yamuna could see a stubborn little spark that refused to wither. Himidoriya Izuku, how fitting, was not willing to give up fighting quite yet. Yamuna let the hand caress the bruised cheek, watching through this child's past. Well, it seems only one person will eventually miss you. Otherwise, your absence will be seen as a blessing. She spoke conversationally, noting how fat tears once again managed to flow from his eyes. But, I assure you, Izuku-kun, what foolish men have thrown in the trash, calling them useless and worthless, have more potential than they can ever hope for. Yamuna gently caressed his cheek. But, you can't stay here, in this world of mundane logic and dull science. The grand yokai got to her feet, and manipulated the border between the two states of the Hakure shrine and between life and death. Sure, Miss Aiki would be lecturing her for days about how one should not meddle in other Karmi's affairs. But Krishna had a plan. And this plan involved a green-haired child who carried divine chaos in his heart and attracted trouble like no other, to learn of the way of bhakti and of the Jinsokian way. Yamuna shuddered, her prescient eyes witnessing a bright future. And then, she gaped this knowledge away and slid into another crack only to land on her favorite sofa. Another portals was open. An obscene amount on sacred snacks were purchased from her favorite merchants and temple from around the world, and, after slipping in her favorite set of pajama, settled down to watch the show, skipping over the angst at the beginning since, to be honest, the world was already a miserable place to be, and the readers did not need to have more on their plates. And then she pressed play. On the day of the entrance exam. ~0. 6 years had passed since his unfortunate adult and consequent spiriting away to the land of fantasy, and Izuku was happy. Looking at herself in the mirror, the now girl mother Bahula, her babysitter and healer, had told her, when her lack of genital and growth spurt had caused the eunuch to spiral further in its depression, that instead of focusing on what her body should be, they should focus on what she, the soul, was, an immortal, perfect entity made of eternity, knowledge and bliss locked away in an imperfect body made of pain, ignorance and oh, so transient. A natural lover of God, who had forgotten this position for a few eternity to many and whom, would she be so inclined, was embarking on a journey back home, back to Godhead. It worked, and Izuku picked up a new name and a new designation, vowing not to move from it unless absolutely necessary. Besides, she liked how Furusodes looked on her, and how despite being a teen, was left alone by lust and Cupid. Lusty people were funny and sad to watch and gross. All this energy for a mere 20 minutes to an out of a fruitless endeavor, unless they were planning for children. After that, Izuku happily elected to use the female pronoun, since all souls, no matter their material covering, were female by nature. Gave herself a twirl with the help of her crutches. She was dressed in a forest green kimono. Her bento was wrapped in a cute pink furoshiki, and her hair was tied in a pair of pigtails. "Hey, Izuku Heim." A silver-haired girl spoke from Izuku's door. It was Mononobe no Fudo, all dressed in her revised Taoist outfits. Oh, it was not something extremely drastic, for she simply lengthened the skirt and proudly wore the Vaishnava tilaka and kanti beads. Hey, Halika, the young girl happily chirped as she hobbled along the ancestral woman, letting the other hug her with all of the strength. Oh Krishna, I'm going to miss you. I'm gonna miss all of you. She teared up, seeing her adopted daughter's beautiful eyes filled with tears. Halika was quick to embrace the somewhat taller girl to her heart. Oh, we haven't begun our trek to the portal, and thou art already tearful. She spoke gently. Worry not, my child. Thou shalt not remain alone for long in this unforgiving land. Izuku, she was happy with this name. Beside, with how gender identity works, she just needed to put it as neutral, and nobody would bug her about it. She hoped. Tearfully nodded. I know. I'll miss Gensakayo, the village, and the mountains. She sniffed as she rubbed her face. Don't want to go. Halika's eyes softened. Oh, but Dekuheim, thou haveth a destiny to walk, and just as Krishna told Arjuna, thou mayst try to escape thine duty and fate, but thou shalt still be forcibly attracted to thy appointed fate. The gray-haired eunuch clenched her fist and eyes. She knew of the holy teachings of God, and she knew that, just like foul weather, one could not stop their own karmic due. I don't want to go, she choked out. I'm not normal, and ANDP people will judge me on my lack of quirk, and she held what was left of her genitals, the phantom pain once again visiting her. She felt Halika's hands on her shoulders, grounding her in the present, the most beautiful gift. Fear not, my child. Thou hast gone through a plethora of suffering and hurdles, but yon Sade Sati is nearing its end. All will improve. The 1,000-year-old, childlike hermit assured her daughter in all but name O Sangita. The old necromancer may have taken a shine to the misplaced and forgotten child. But only Halika had bothered wiping her tears at night and being there when the pain was too great. Not only that, but Dekuheim had sometimes called her mother. An honor not many had. I know I have to. I have to show the world the power of Krishna's devotee. And that despite choosing non-violence, that we can still hold our own, and that we know how to deal with villains and incidents better than the pros. She managed to stem her sobbing as her back straightened. She was not the same young boy who had been bullied almost to death. She was not a Deku. She was Dekuheim, servant of Krishna and daughter of the gods and hermits of the land of fantasy. But most importantly, an aspiring Vaishnavi, not yet initiated, it would be next year. Filled with flaws, but darn determined to give Krishna whatever she could. Sanely, of course. Fanaticism was the ugliest thing in existence, and Haim liked pretty things. Yes, Halika nodded with pride. And with thine future set in Yui, thou art bound to cause the impact we all need. Deku's shoulder slump. Halika gently raised Dekuheim's chin so that their eyes could meet. Haim-chan, fret not, for thou shan't be facing this trial alone. We will all be with you. The girl like hermit promised her young charge. Now come, dearest. The others art waiting for you with bated breath. And thou haste to make haste not to be late for the entrance exam. Yes, mother. The entrance exam. Despite being thrown away by the most fallen hero-worshipping culture, Dekuheim still longs to attend UA and to see what type of quirk the ever-leaking mana was producing. I wonder where Bakugo ended up. He would have been a problem, but after thinking about it, she heard her mother figure. Nay, such a person would be considered a problem. Acting like a hero while acting like a villain. This youth would merely be looking for fights, and his abrasive attitude would drive people away. Brainwashing sucks. Haim muttered regretfully. I still think he would make a good hero. But so was everyone enamored by his quirk. Power without strength of character will only cause pain and suffering. Chandrakanti, or Yagakoro Iron, spoke up, making Haim raise her head. She was in the front garden of the Earth Palace, where she resided in the winter. She made friends with a few denizens of Old Hell, including Miss Savitri, or Miss Satori Komji. She was an amnesiac mind reader. She didn't remember her old name, so she had taken the name of her species while she tried to remember. But nowadays, people called her Savitri, or Savitri Devi Dasi, a servant of Achudananda Swami. As she and her mind-reading friend exited to the courtyard, Deku was met with all of her friends she had made since this fateful night. Friends from Makai and Hakake, Old Hell, past the Sanzu sacred bank, and even going as far as Bava Agra and the moon. She had friends from the Hakajo Kuro, from the Forest of Magic, the Bamboo Forest of the Lost, and even from under the Youkai Mountain and the top. I'll miss them. Tears flooded her eyes as she tried to stem them with the end of her cotton furusode. Yes, and we will miss you also. Savitri spoke to her friend. But don't fear, we will be with you. We are all just a thought away. The Satori hugged the quality weeping girl as she walked further in or hobbled, in Haim's case. All of her friends, some humans, other youkai in nature, were there, ready to see her off. They sat Haim in a chair, and all came forward, carrying gifts like spell cards, blessings, trinkets, and prasadam, of course. Hugs were given, tears were shed, and love was shared. It was a sweet image of love between a normal human and overpowered being, and that was manifested and maintained by the mercy and mutual love for God, the creator and maintainer of everything. But as with everything in the material world, what had a beginning needed to end. Deku, Yamuna spoke up, standing tall and regal beside Manjalali Manjari, or Okina Matara. It's time to go. I'll drop you off in front of Ue, so you don't have to tire yourself prematurely. Deku nodded as she gave one last hug to her friend Chen, or Chattersama Dividasi. Her eyes were red and puffy, and determination shone through as of yet unshed tears. Don't worry, Deku-chan. We'll be here if you need us, and even if you don't need us, and if you feel you can't rely on us. Hashiguma Yami, the chieftain of hell, walked up to the tiny Yanuchian girl. Then rely on Bhagavan, he'll get you out of trouble. And you can't feel lonely if the sexiest guy lives rent-free in your heart. Those words had the intended effect, and Haim began to giggle. Yeah, okay, I won't leave Krishna alone. You can trust me on that. And how? There was one thing about Gensakayo that made it different from anything else in the world save for some very specific places like Mayapur, Vrindavan, and every iteration of God's playground. What that, some unspecific times ago, they had switched from the Asian religious trio to full-on Gaudiya Vaishnavism, or the eternal science of self-realization through pure, unalloyed service to the highest and most personal form of God, the supreme and absolute truth. Bhagavan Sri Krishna and Srimati Radharani, the supreme personality of Godhead and his primal, loving energy. And for the Gaudiyas of the world, the fused form of the two, known as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Radha and Krishna as one, the avatar of mercy for the most fallen age. And for some very fortunate reason, the Golden Lord had flexed a bit, and now the Jinsakian were now known for chanting Jai Sachai Nandana, Gaurahari and Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare at the top of their lungs while dancing and flying around like the maddest of people. Everyone truly was mad in Wonderland. I'll miss this place. Deku wetly whispered against Yuuma's shoulder. She was practicing, but she had yet to find her appointed guru. Yeah, and we'll miss you too. The Tautite crooned. Hell be, I don't know if quieter will be the right word, but it will definitely be gloomier. Yuuma sighed after she took a greeting with a whiff of Deku's hair and scent. Then she pushed the young girl away, yet keeping her still within the reach of her arms. Now go get 'em, bestie. Go and show the world the glories of the divine alliance for the propagation of love of God. She cheered as she raised her hands as a gesture of victory. for Prabhupada and Garanga, Nityananda. Suddenly, the sharp sound of reality dearing itself stopped all conversation as the mistress of gaps appeared above it. While she still had her mysterious and mischievous smile, there was sadness also. Who's going to die? Haim asked her greatest benefactor. Well, isn't this a trick question? Deku Haim rolled her eyes with fond exasperation. But seriously, will I lose my body once I walk out your gap and into concrete hell again? Oh, no, not at all. The Grand Youkai waved off this silly concern. You will have a long life, trust me. She then let out a gusty sigh as tears fell from her eyes. I'm just seeing a little girl on the cusp of adulthood, walking away from the shelter of her family and friends and about to face the big, scary world filled with danger at every step. I see you make more friends than enemies, but you will still have to face strife. You will be loved by those who are important, but hated by most at the start. Your adventure will start with a single step, and it will end as you start your dance with the Lord. You always give this blessing. Dekuheim said with a blush. Well, there is nothing wrong in aiming to have another dancer in his rasa dance. Yamuna Tilda, the young girl, whined. Let me first learn how to be a maid servant at the feet of my guru. I'm not even close. She flailed around, cheating a bit with levitation sense, with the state of her hips. Standing unaided was about a reality as having the last of the quirkless walk out of Gensakayo and taking over the world. Wait, she heard her father. And indeed, dropping from the cloud cover's vault was Prince Toyosatomimi no Miko, or Uma Divi Dasi, descending like the celestial being she was. He came fluttering majestically behind her. She landed in the courtyard as Yami and Savitri surrounded her, making sure the demons of hell would not dare eat her. The Shikazen stood in front of the shorter girl. My dear Musum, she began as she placed her hand on Dekuheim's shoulder. In the short time I've known you, I've seen you grown from a traumatized eunuch to something I know will be on the throne one day. Once again, it took everything in Haim's arsenal not to weep. Uma's face turned serious. I know that you are about to step into Kali Yuga hell, in a place where those who are normal are seen as weak and useless. Dekuheim felt more tears running down her face. But know something, Musum. Despite what everyone says, the only one you have to impress is God. And for him, even a small spider throwing sand in the ocean as a service to him is considered great. The ancient prince spoke as she brought her daughter to her arms. I love you the way you are. You are neither useless nor obsolete. You are dear to all of us, and we will always be but a thought away. The imperial prince spoke with a wavering voice as she placed a finely crafted ko-amot mask on Dekuheim's freckled face. This mask, Kamala has infused all of her emotional energies in it. It will inspire trust and hope, and it will give you the charisma you need to pass the greatest of obstacles. I can't feel any magic here, Dad, but it's the thought that counts, Haim taught gratefully. The fear of being recognized as Midoriya Izuku now gone. She didn't want to be hated. She didn't want to be hurt again. Yes, but she will never get to those obstacles if she arrives late at the school. Uma-chan. Ara. Can't I bid our collective daughter and good friend good luck and fair wind? Yes, you may, and I believe you did. Yamuna then addressed Dekuheim. Now come, Haim-chan, your future awaits. Dekuheim regretfully let go of her dad and hobbled to the portal, only to have the imposing woman stoop down and engulf the shorter teen in her silken embrace. Everything will be fine. May Sri Sri Radha Krishna remains eternally with you. May Lord Narashima Deva protect you from all harm, and may Garanga use you as his instrument of mercy. The Grand Yokai bid as she removed the ko-amot mask to press a kiss on Haim's forehead, nestled between the two branches of her talaka. Now go, make us proud. And if I fail, you will still make us proud. And with that, the Yoshima gaped her away to Misutafu, in an alleyway not that far from the legendary entryway. Legendary. It's only called that because one hero partially ended one incident. I'm sure it's overblown. The building's not even cute. She hoped groused as she hobbled to it, merging with the crowd. She definitely caught the attention of many with the ancient accoutrement. What with the Furosode and the no mask? But Dekuheim was not here to fit. She was here to make a statement. She walked through the gate without much problem save from one rock. But nothing else beyond that, and nothing that a bit of floating would not fix. Oh, be careful. A girl spoke and Heim turned to face her, causing the fluffy brunette to balk. You think I'm fluffy? She asked, now thoroughly unsure now that she had the full attention of the odd girl. Yes, absolutely, Dekuheim confirmed as she hobbled further in the compound, and to the absolutely ugly H-shaped building where the registrations were happening. Your hair is soft and fluffy. You have a gloriously round cheek decorated with spots of pink on them. You have broad and auspicious hips and thighs, and your bosom complements the rest. She praised. Immediately, the girl's face turned a crimson red. Oh my gosh, are you hitting on me? It's nice of you, but I'm totally not into girls. I don't really have a gender anymore, Dekuheim assured me. And I wasn't trying to court you, but stating the fact. You, whoever you are, have a very good body karma, and your beauty will grow with you. And Heim knew full well that she would be a sweet older lady, one that would be taken care of at the end of her life. Oh, Krishna, please protect her. And if, by the way, what is your name? She asked her healthy companion. Oh, I'm Uraraka Ochako. It's a pleasure to meet you, the bubbly girl greeted. Wah, so cute. She reminds me of those nice fairy by the Hakure shrine. I use the name Dekuheim Moria. Dekuheim? Uraraka-chan parroted. That's, useless. It's Reed, doll princess. My sister named me after a character from Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask. Oh, all right then. Uraraka mitered as she fiddled with her fingers. Anyway, why are you here? To pass the test. Heim answered simply as she looked for the registration line, hoping it was not a pre-registration event. Sure, we may have the internet up in the mountains and down in old hell. But she had been so busy with the last incident. Heim had completely forgotten to check. But, you can't walk. Uraraka-san protested. There's going to be a physical exam. No idea what it'll be. I put my money on robots since humans would be begging for casualty. And we are obviously going to face an opponent. Still, I wonder why it has to be robots and not something like fairies, way cheaper, and they can respawn upon death. Yeah, I need to talk to the principal about this. I'm sure the Fae kind will be thrilled to mess with teenagers. Heim chuckled. Oh yeah, pranking fairies vs teenagers with powers. Heim would pay to see that. Don't be ridiculous. There's no way Yua would use robots. Uraraka protested. I'm sure it's something like old school Olympics, but with quirks. What's your quirk, by the way? But before Dekuheim could answer the bubbly, yet insensitive girl, she was in front of the registration officer. Name? The officer asked, probably someone hired for the occasion. Do I have to give my legal name? She asked. I am under protection, she admitted. Something happened in my youth that would make my identity a huge liability. The officer raised his head from his computer, looked at Dekuheim, and, after typing on his console, gave her a tablet. Just write your legal name here, and whatever information you can't say openly. Oh, Krishna bless you. And thus Dekuheim filled her registration, entering her age, name to be called, gender, and quirk. Miss, you're quirkless. Yes, I am aware. I can't let you. But before the idiot could continue, Dekuheim interrupted him. Yes, you can. There are no rules that prevent a quirkless individual from entering the UA registration. And if I remember correctly, they are also inviting whatever quirkless potential students to attend. Probably to bait them to get killed by those robots, don't they? The clerk paled. Ah, so it is robots then. Don't worry. I've already faced death a few times over. I do not fear him any more. Deku assured the man. So, let's proceed then. But, Deku huffed. And if you really need to put something as a quirk, then just put the magic of friendship. The man stared. Hurry up. You're making people wait, you know? She scowled behind her mask. Sure, she may be a bit shy. Bit of one thing Kalavati Kaguya and Tajiko had taught the young girl was that shyness has its place. But don't become a carpet, and feminine pride has its use. But don't use it so often. All right, miss. The clerk spoke with a scowl. Your family better not sue us when you die. If my destiny is to die on a mock battlefield, then may this broken body fall gracefully. She inclined her head. And may I remember Govinda at the time of death. She spoke as she took her badge and number. Thank you for your help, and please accept my apology for whatever sass I gave you. And with that, Deku proceeded to the testing proper. ~0. The written part of the exam was rather easy, especially since Yamuna had coached her into understanding many of the modern-day laws that surrounded quirks and what's make a hero or a villain. And all of this didn't give much hope to the adopted princess of Gensokyo. And she wasn't shy to voice it out on paper. Japan was heading to a bloody civil war between heroes and villains, and if they didn't change a few things pronto, well, all those buildings and fancy restaurants, living in places of nature and greenery, would be ruined. And Deku would simply return home and let the carnage happen. She had better things to do than being a hero for such a vile civilization. Also, there were so many people around. Sure, fairies and youkai were plentiful in Gensokyo. But so were trees and flowers. Obviously, everyone is stressed out here because of the lack of greenery, and crimes are going up. Humans. No one is meant to like in a place made of concrete and ugly stones. What to say about a severe lack of ultimate goal and God conseil? And you, one young tall man with glasses and extremely stiff movement, a descendant of Yoshika, perhaps. Why do you keep mumbling? You are causing a disturbance. And why are you giving me a Uno reverse card in blue? Deku rolled her eyes. And what you are wearing is inappropriate for the physical exam. And you should not be here due to your handicap. You can't be a hero without proper legs. For her part, the Jinsokian folded her palms and raised her eyes to the heavens as she prayed for the Supreme Lord for strength, forbearance, and tolerance. Then the Banshee asked the Mick about the useless zero-pointer. Deku gave him half an ear as she focused on Uraraka-san, praying for her to be safe during the entrance exam. She was not worried about herself, since it was not the first time she was fighting in her current state. ~0. Up in the observation room, most of the faculty members were observing the big names and those with desirable quirks. Yes, so it was also a question of quirk. But let's be honest. The Hero Commission had certain guidelines about what was a heroic quirk. It was also a way for Nezu to be 5 steps ahead of the potential breeders and kidnappers. Midnight cooed as she looked up at one participant. We have a quirkless girl, it seems. Really? Aizawa asked with a raise of his brows. Who is it? Number 29B. Snipe spoke up. Holy Jesus, she ain't got the legs to fight? He exclaimed as the main screen focused on the young girl. What the hell is she wearing? Aizawa ran his hand in his hair. I mean, we did tell the attendee to wear practical clothing. But who the hell thinks wearing a no mask and a kimono to be something proper to wear in a heroic entrance exam? Miss Moria, apparently. Mimiri purred. She will get destroyed. Quite a wake-up call, don't you think? Forget about what she's wearing. She's handicapped, All Might exclaim. Quirkless, on crutches. Nezu, please pause this whole thing and throw her out. Put her in Gen Ed, but please. he pleaded for the innocent girl's life. No, why should I do that? The mammal asked. Every student signs a waiver that liberates us from the burden of their death, same as their legal guardians. This young girl is taking this exam, knowing full well that she may die. And who am I to prevent her from participating? Who knows? It may be a dying wish. Once again, All Might opened his mouth to protest. But Present Mike had already started the exam. In the observation room, the teachers and administrative staff braced themselves for the girl's imminent demise. Miss Moria lurched forwards, falling forward like a doll shoved forward. And, the great shock of all, flew off. Needless to say, All Might could not hold his bloody cough as he once again witnessed his sensei's quirk in action. What in the ever-loving fuck? Shouta cursed as he turned to face Nedzu. Nedzu, I thought you told me she was quirkless. Told you? Mimiri repeated with narrowed eyes. He merely caught a glimpse of her application. Nedzu explained with a hidden sadistic smile. As with every year, Shota will try to catch a glimpse of who will participate. I let him see a bit more this year. Show. Aw, come on partner. Ya just cheatin' at dice now. And a bevy of other protests was heard as All Might desperately tried to keep his inflated form as he watched Nana return, navigating the city like an elegant butterfly or Superman. And then, the notification for the Depliant robot in the fake city. Now, let's see what she will do. Nedzu spoke over the rim of his cup. I know we are supposed to be impartial, but Miss Moria is quite the anomaly, don't you think? Bet this whittle wench told a fat fib about her status. Snipe drawled. Yeah, won't let her in. Can't stand fibbers. Aizawa was about to grill the cowboy about his choice when the flying Miko pulled another trick up her expansive sleeves. Lasers and light bullets. The moment she laid an eye on the exam bot, she unleashed a flurry of colorful laser bullets and, where those butterflies? Yes, those were butterflies. And they were shot from the tip of her crutches, going out at a rate that reminded Snipe of a Gatling gun on steroids. Needless to say, the robots were but spare parts after that. Then the kimono-clad girl zoomed away and cleared out a bit more robot before she stopped, turned around and began yelling at the stunned hopeful. What are you doing here? Lord Yomai's robotic army is upon us. Soldiers, aid me. Grab your weapons and fight. This was what the rest of the hopefuls needed to get their asses in gears. And at this point, Miss Moria remained in the sky, nonchalantly dodging bullets while offering air support and pointers to the student, even rescuing quite a few by pulling them out of danger. Needless to say, many pros were wondering how this child had this much experience in a chaotic scenario. But for All Might, it was a nightmare. There on the screen, in the hollow grounds of his alma mater, was a mysterious quirkless girl flying and shooting lasers and other light constructs at the robots. Just by the villain points, she would make it heroic. What to say about her rescue point? Hell, Tashinori would happily give her team points and leadership points, support points and style points for her performance. If not for the fact that she was using a pair of quirk, and she had her face hidden. After 9 minutes, Nedzu, with a sadistic grin, unleashed the 0-pointer. And as expected, all the attendant ran for their lives, some not even bothering to look back, while some went to look for some last-minute point. A few othered helping those who were lagging behind. What was Ida doing? Just running like that away from danger. He was practically at the front of the pack also. But one figure remained like a looming sentinel, watching over the stragglers as she shot whatever robot dared to take pot shot at the escape. Already, Aizawa could determine that she was not new to this. Miss Moria had experience with dealing with crisis situations such as these. She had the power, the presence, and the charisma to make people move. Suddenly, a screen came up, flashing red with urgency. One of the examinees, a girl with a fair share of villain points and rescue points, a perfect body and a perfect quirk, was stuck under the rubble. And her quirk, zero gravity, had reached its limit from the lost breakfast on the ground. She was valiantly trying to escape, but it was no use. The tread of the zero-pointer would crush her. Now, while they had made all students sign this legal paper, making it impossible for them to sue the school if something, including death, were to happen during the entrance exam, it didn't mean that there was no failsafe in place to prevent such a thing. And Aizawa dearly hoped that Nedzu remembered that those kids had nothing to do with the scientist that had tortured him in the name of science. The mammal had a moral compass. He had to have one. Hell, some villains had one too. But the beast grinned, and Shouta almost used an eraser on the demon, only to hear Miss Moriya's declaration. Divine swords of the seven sages. Aizawa only had the time to turn around to see the flying girl raise a hand as a sword in a black scabbard with a golden lotus root decoration on it as body, and a sun on its hilt before she disappeared, only to reappear at the top left of the zero-pointer. And then she slashed the beast diagonally, from top to bottom. The zero-pointer was that, a zero-pointer. Because if a mere child managed to take the hulking behemoth out, then he was automatically added to Class A1's roster. This girl. This kimono-wearing Miko who needed crutches to walk, who was marked as quirkless, and who seemed to be made out of spun glass, had decimated the beast with a fucking sword. In the background, Nedzu cawed freely, his tea spilling everywhere. That was until Miss Moriya destroyed the rubble, trapping the gravity girl. Unsafe way of evacuation. This would have to be remedied. And then processed to stab her. Needless to say, the whole room became silent after that. Needless to say, after the gratuitous murder of Uraraka-san, the observation room cleared out in record time, and robots were called to contain the murderous teen with the magic, the sword, and the multiple quirks. So, oblivious, All Might was the first at the scene. What met him was not what he'd expected. Moriya Izuku, that was the girl's legal name, and there was no one that existed in any database with this name, had stabbed what should have been his rescue victim and a direct ticket to UA, and out of the dirty grip of the HPSC. But no. She had to do the illogical thing. She had to kill Miss Uraraka in cold blood because of reasons. But to be honest, Gensakayo sounded like a very far and backwater kind place. Since who the hell wore a cotton kimono nowadays? The group of heroes arrived at the location of the horrible crime, All Might at their head. Now, while the girl had committed a heinous crime, she did not deserve to be plummeted to a pulp by Mr. Steroids are for the weak. So Eraserhead does the logical thing and erased the moving land mass's quirk. Needless to say, he was not prepared to see him go poof and be replaced by his skeletal secretary. Well, that worked. And doesn't Shouta knows the headache that will follow this particular discovery. But as he approached the scene of the crime, he noticed something peculiar. Izuku was laying on the ground beside Uraraka-san and talking to her, and looming over them two gave no further logical answer as that what was going on. The two girls were too engrossed in talking about different cloud formations in a cloudless sky, Moriya lamenting the fact that she missed her pink cloud friend and hoped he wouldn't cause any trouble. Since, while there was plenty of blood on the ground, Uraraka-san's body held not wound. Her cheeks were rosy and healthy, and she was breathing deeply, seemingly sleeping and wholly unaware of the chatterbox chatting away. She would give Izashi a run for his money, and Shouta prayed to whatever cosmic power that was out there that the two would never meet. There was no sign of the unfortunate accident, save for the blood and Uraraka-san's ruined gym clothes. Oh, and there were no swords in sight either. Another quirk, perhaps? What the hell is going on here? Shouta asked with his most neutral yet commanding voice, which apparently was loud enough to rouse Uraraka-san from her torpor. And, alarmingly enough, the first thing she did was to check her body, clenching and flexing her hands in front of her, looking both confused and receiving the greatest revelation. Oh, thank Nedzu, Shouta let out in relief. while activating his quirk on the grounded girl, shrouded in mystery. Speaking of Izuku, she was holding her hips, moaning. And it was not due to a quirk. No, she had no quirk at all. There was nothing to stop. So, she truly is quirkless. But how did she manage to fly, then? And those bullets? And the sword? Shouta had so many questions now. Questions to All Might or Yagi Toshinori to Moriya-san, to Nedzu. And to God, if the bastard existed. Miss Uraraka, is everything all right? He asked instead as he once again scanned her over for any signs of injury. Nothing with horror how her outfit was practically destroyed, as if the zero-pointer had been right on top of her. Yes, my body is. Miss Uraraka nodded. Shouter raised a brow at the wording. Well, it is now, anyway. I mean, I should have known something like that would happen since I had to sign a waiver and all that. She sighed as she inspected the many holes now decorating her shirt and pants, all of them telling of a gruesome story. Apparently, the zero-pointer did not, in fact, crush her to death, but the piece of concrete she had been buried under. Not that it made it better. Not by a long shot. Yeah, meaning this exam, aimed for teenagers, really is a ploy to get rid of weak and useless quirks and clean away the gene pool. Miss Moriya spoke up from her spot on the ground. Listen, when I'll see the principal, I need to tell him about how he needs to get rid of the robots and hire fairies instead. So, fairies exist? Uraraka asked as he got up and dusted herself, showing no bruising nor scratches. How about aliens and Lunarians? I have a Lunarian friend. She's well over 1,000. Actually, she's... And then Miss Moriya began to recite more digits than it was healthy for a human to know. Deciding that it was time to stop this nonsense, since it was clear Moriya-san's sanity was extremely shaky. Shouta spoke up in his familiar drawl he would use on criminals. As interesting as this conversation is, Moriya Izuku, I would rather you explain to me why you stabbed Miss Uraraka. She was dying. The crazy girl stated, still supine on the ground. Thankfully, my father's sword not only has the ability to cut through matter and illusion, but it can also heal the most fatal wounds as long as the spirit soul is not on Yamaloka. By the way, Uraraka-san, how are you feeling? She asked the apparently revived girl. And by the state of her clothing, Shouts could not deny that she had been a casualty. And wasn't that something horrific? Uraraka-san gave a broad, bright smile as she gave off an exuberant smile. Never better, but... Of course, there's a but, Shouta taught with deep dread. I feel like I'm not Uraraka Ochako, like, not this body. But, what am I if I'm not this? She asked with some concern. You are the spirit soul living in a body by the name or Uraraka Ochako. You, the soul, have no birth, no death. You do not age and nothing will destroy you. Not even a stupidly overpowered quirk. Oh, that's nice. The rosy-cheeked girl cheered. Don't have to worry about dying now. Moriya chuckled from her place on the ground. And you are the eternally separated part and parcel of God, Krishna. Wait, he exists? Oh, of course he does. Aizawa could practically hear the Willy teen's eye roll. For his part, what wouldn't he do for a long nap and waking up to a boring routine, including a completely underwhelming class? Hell, he would be the happiest man alive if he wouldn't have to deal with Moriya-san. She was beyond a problem child and downright into chaotic gremlin from hell. Suddenly, Recovery Girl arrived, riding on her scooter/contact Medibot. All right, enough chit-chat. Was wounded, she commanded. I'm all right, Moriya-san spoke from her spot on the floor. And I don't think the legendary Recovery Girl could regen a long-lost limb. You will know when I become a student. I was more worried about the girl you stabbed. Recovery Girl deadpanned, her accusation her eyes hard. Shouta knew those eyes, and he was thoughtfully impressed that none of the girls were by her tiny old commander ways. I'm perfectly fine too. Uraraka-san confirmed with full energy. I fell even better than when I came in, too. Chiyo gave the brunette a skeptical once-over. She was crushed under some rebels, and the zero-pointer did squish her body until the soul was expelled. Not my finest moment, Uraraka added. Thankfully, the 7 sages empowered my father's sword with their shatki, otherwise I'd be a ghost haunting y'all. 'Cause my parent can't pay for my funeral. Tragic. Absolutely. Shouta sent a tired glance at Recovery Girl, who was staring at Moriya-san with the same hungry eyes a rare figurine collector would have if faced with an Iron Man's mint condition action figure would be presented in front of her. Those were banned. Wondered why. And how about you, miss? You may call me Deku, but Moriya is what everyone feels comfortable with, she stated. Are you hurt somewhere? Chiyo asked as she began to inspect Moriya-san. I never expected to see you fly, and I was about to run Nedzu Trough for having you participate in the exam. Willy old mole, this one. Oh, I was hurt, and my thighs can't move all that well. And I did landed wrong, but it's not that bad. I was just watching my cloud friend. See? Moriya-san pointed at a lone cloud floating in the sky, before waving at it. Anywho, can we leave now? I still need to find a place to stay. Yeah, I really want to head back to my flat too. I had a big day, and I can feel it will rain also. Oh, you can feel that? Moriya asked as she floated up, proving that she was not too hurt. Uraraka nodded. Yup, Dad showed me how too. And I guess my gran had this super useful quirk that let her read the atmospheric pressure and the wind. Wow, now that's an impressive quirk. Midoriya spoke with clear appreciation. I wonder, was she feeling the pressure with her skin, her hair, or her eyeballs? Or maybe she could hear the fairy whispering about what would be the weather for the next day. But then, this would not be called a quirk, and she would be another quirkless person with amazing skills that had nothing to do with genetic coding. Not that it's really from one's genetic, but from… All right, you two. Shouta mildly snapped at the two. Just get out of here. All right, Mr. Hero. Uraraka gave a salute. Of course, Aizawa Shouta-san. Miss Moriya said, surprising the underground hero more than he cared to admit. But before he could demand how the crazy girl managed to get his legal name, she lifted off the ground and turned to Uraraka-san. Uraraka, mind coming to my place? I know it's pretty sudden, but I moved in from another village. A village that had remained the same for over the past century or so, and I would need someone better versed in today's lifestyle and cityscape to teach me how to navigate. She bowed, still not touching the ground. Just call me Ochako. And of course, I'll help you get used to Tokyo. Not sure about Musutafu though, since I come from Fukuoka myself. Oh really? And thus, Shouta, Nedzu, since of course the damn mammal had peeped in the weird conversation. And a very deflated All Might. The goof was playing his competent, quirkless secretary, Mr. Yagi. Credit where credit was due on this one. Watch with an uncomfortable mixture of awe, confusion, fear and dread as the two examinees walked or flew, in Moriya's case, out of the testing ground and to the green-haired future problem home somewhere in Musutafu. For Shouta, Yagi and Nedzu, the next course of action was clear. They had to find as much information they could about Moriya Izuku, and fast. For all they knew, this multi-quirked, quirkless person was the first sight of something sinister. And thus, Shouta followed the two. Or would have, if he had not forgotten what he was supposed to do once he boarded the train. ~0. 1 bus ride later. Dekuheim could not wait to tell all about it to her fairy friends back home. Sintamani would be so jealous about the fact that the eunuch had boarded one of those fable buses. And the two girls or girl and her eunuch friend were out of Ua and wandering around, looking for Heim's apartment. So, you don't know where we are going. Ochako, after what had happened, It would be ridiculous to have the two girls call each other by anything lesser than their given name. No, Haim admitted as she read each and every number and nameplate she could find. I started off in Old Hell, and Yamuna Jai gapped me near the entrance of the campus. Otherwise, it's been a long time since I've set foot in mundane Tokyo. Wait, you were in hell? Ochako gasped as she grabbed her new friend by the shoulders. Oh, my God. Krishna, how did you? Why would someone so sweet and pure get there? I was visiting a few friends, and it was for my training also, Haim informed her new, absolutely human friend with the floating ability. Ochako was staring at the somewhat taller girl. Wait, you got training from hell? The fluffy teen with the red cheeks asked as she stared at the hobbling greenette. She was currently imagining a literal training from hell montage. Ochako's lovely brown eyes blew wide open as realization dawned on her. Oh, that's how you hurt your legs, she pointed. Oh Krishna, she had finger pads. Deku so wanted to poke them. No, I just had a blow job at 8 that rendered me crippled and without any genitals. The magical girl absent-mindedly revealed. Say, Akin, does this place looks way too expensive to house affordable housing units? Haim asked her new friend, turning to face her since the bubbly girl had gone frightfully silent. Wait, you, and pale. Deku Haim rolled her eyes behind her mask. They got blown up, and since it was a sizable explosion, my pelvic bone got shattered. It got healed, but chronic pains, lose of muscle mass, and traumatized connective tissues and a whole slew of other bumps became my daily companions. Oh, poor you. Ochako teared up as she hugged the taller girl. It's all right. It's in the past, and this nasty piece of karma is done and gone. Haim waved off. And it's not like it made my life unlivable, or prevent me from fighting and flying. Who did this to you? The brunette asked. A vengeful fire burnt bright in her chocolate eyes. Oh, some kids in my old school. I don't even remember his name, let alone which school I used to go to, she admitted. I think we're getting closer. Seriously? Ochako asked. It's the rich part of town. Endeavor lives here, so there are no villains daring to come near him, she explained as she looked around in clear discomfort. Deku Haim noticed immediately how her friend was scanning each and every alley, not out of fear, but out of greed. Ochako, you are poor, don't you? What type of question is that? Ochako screeched before covering her mouth, hoping this would not cause any noise complaints. And having a noise complaint ticket on top of the debts her parent had would. Well, she barely had enough to pay for her hero suit on top of her rent and food, let alone having something better than a somewhat armored suit and a face shield and poofy boots. It wasn't a question. And you just confirmed that your financial problems are affecting you emotionally. Don't worry, if my house is nearby, then I'm sure there's enough room for you. The magical girl proposed with glee. Oh, how nice would it be not to be alone in an empty house? Ochako stared at Deku Haim. Before her cheeks turned red, Haim's face fell. Ah, you have your pride. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult you. She bowed down as tears gathered in her eyes. She was used to being blunt, being well liked by the honest of hell and heaven because of it. And the Satori, since she was so forward and could not manipulate anyone for the life of her. Still, this was the outside world, where people had their pride and who saw asking for help as something dishonorable, which, in the young Vaishnavi's mind, was absolutely bonkers since everyone here were but mere humans with the 4 flaws, making all their endeavors hard and painful. They would lie to one another, despite saying that they trusted each other. And they would get cheated, they would get illusioned, and they would forget. And Izuku had completely forgotten that in Japan, it was all about pride. And like an idiot, she had proposed to Uraraka-san to admit the fact that she was poorer than the eunuch and live at her expense. meaning, I'm sorry. She tried to stem her tears, but as per usual, they spilt off from the mask's eyes as she sobbed. Wait, what? Uraraka panicked. What's wrong? Is it because? I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to insult you. She sobbed harder. Her first day out of Gensukayo, he first friend. And numerous blunders. No, no. The next thing she knew, Dekuheim was crushed to Uraraka's bosom. I'm sorry. I'm not. You're right about how tight I am financially. I let my pride as in Uraraka take over. I mean, my dad never accepts help for anyone. And my mom can't too since, Da's the one in charge. But anyway, I'm not here to pile you up with my bad karma. We need to find your home. Ochako cheered with vigor. Dekuheim sniffled as she took out a handkerchief from her broad sleeve and cleaned up her face. Okay, she squeaked, relieved that her budding friendship with the fluffy girl was not over yet due to her faux pas. Once again, being raised by the youkai. Since it was known that she had a connection with Yamuna by the human village, meant that social cues were not clear to her. Nevertheless, by Krishna and Guru's causeless mercy, Ochako was not so irremediably insulted that she'd left the crippled girl out in an unknown place, crying. Now, what's the address again? Ochako asked as she cheeked her Caterpillar phone. I don't think I got it right the first time. It's this. Dekuheim showed her friend her address slip again, and Ochako paled. I can't. Izu-chan. You're living in a brand new, as in, it just got built, villa. This one. She pointed at the majestic building overlooking a forest. It seemed as if Gensukayo had decided that she wanted to claim a piece of Musuatfu, and thus took over an entire hill and vale for it. Izu-chan. Ochako grabbed her friend's sleeve. This is Sokoto Hill, the most haunted place in Musutafu. She warned as her round, worried gaze never left the apparently cursed piece of property. Years ago, there was a fire here. A blue fire. And on this hill, rumor has it that Endeavor's first son burned to death. Oh, so this is why it was sold then, Heim spoke with a smile hidden under her sacred no mask. Good to know. The poor son of Endeavor will definitely need the holy name to get out of his perilous situation. Now come on, friend. We are in dire need of a shower and cloth. Heim's tone broke no argument as she found the expansive property's gate. And find it she did. And the sight of a person she thought she would never get to see again. There, sleeping while standing up, her intense red hair being played within the slight early spring breeze. She wore an emerald green dress and waistcoat over a white, short-sleeved shirt. And on her blazing lock, a beret sat. A golden star was proudly proclaiming the name of the gate guard of the Scarlet Devil Mansion. Mohini, Heim exclaimed in pure joy as she woke up the guard, who quickly took the most generic and badly done fighting posture, only to lose her attempt at appearing fearsome, when a flying eunuch collided with her, her eyes filled with tears of love and joy. Oh, my sweet baby Krishna, Heim, it's been so long. The woman, Madonna Mohana Mohini Devidas, cried in happiness as she spun the shorter girl around. Wait until Mrs. Gargi and Mrs. Pondra Maya hear of this. Wait, are they here? Is my magic teacher here? Heim asked with hope. She simply adored her friend from the big, red mansion. Mohina's face fell. No, her and Mrs. Gargi had to remain back in Gensukayo. Oh. But the redhead gently grabbed Dekuheim in her arms. We're still a few waiting for you. And with that, the dragon lady of Gensukayo jumped to the property's front door, leaving Ochako in the proverbial dust. And then Mohini jumped back and grabbed her too. ~0. Heim-chan, a woman with blue hair and wearing a dress of green, blue and yellow, yelped happily as she hugged the short girl. Around her, a painted dragon swirled in numerous hues as he snuggled to Izu-chan. It's good to see you again, my friend. Keiki. Don't ask Sama at the end, silly. I'm your friend, remember that. The glowing woman spoke as she poked Deku Hime's nose before turning her gaze to Ochako. Oh, and who might she be? She asked as she stepped closer to the 15-year-old. Ochako stared at the colorful, glowing woman, nodding that her feet didn't touch the ground, didn't seem to blink and casted no shadows, and just screamed artist. Oh, Uraraka Ochako, please take good care of me. The brunette bowed as low as she could. Sure, the other girl might look young, but, well, she knew there was more to her than meets the eyes. Io, am I smelling right? Is Sakai here with another magic baby? Another woman asked as she rushed out the door, and her entire appearance caused Ochako to balk. She had deep, dark skin like chitin, wore a black shirt and short ensemble with a golden chain pattern printed on and green metallic rings decorating all of its hems. She had long, wild gray hair stilled in a mullet, how come it worked for her, and was barefooted. On her arms and legs were about a dozen or so orange ribbons. Her ice blue eyes were trained on Ochako, and the girl felt awfully creeped out about this. Beside her, Deku Hime gasped. Momoyo. Bring it in, girl. The creepy-looking woman opened her arms wide, preparing for the little bullet that was an ecstatic Deku Hime. Then, she felt a hand on her shoulder. Turning around, she saw this beautiful and exceedingly tall woman wearing a red and blue dress decorated with constellations, accurate constellation, might she add. Her hair was as silver as the moon. A small nurse had sat at the top of her thick, luscious hair. We saw that you received the 7 sages' blessing. How do you feel now, O fortunate soul? Ochako just stared, trying to form words that didn't exist in the face of the glowing, otherworldly woman. I think I realized I was the soul, but now. I think I'm Ochako and poor? She asked. This morning, she had expected to go through the exam, ace it, then come back and have her parents finally shower her with affection. Not dying under a giant robot's thread, get revived, and then face the ultimate reality that she was not this body. To make a friend with her staber, offered a place to stay other than her dingy, bed-bug-infested apartment with her super loud neighbors, their dogs, and whatever the fuck they were cooking. And definitely not meeting with this absolutely beautiful, otherworldly woman that glowed like the full autumn moon and whose eyes would not blink and cast no shadows. Who are you? She finally managed to ask. The woman smiled broadened. I have quite a few names. Some call me Yagokoro Iron no Omoike, or just Dr. Yagokoro. But I now go by Ekarani Dividasi. Ekalani? With an R, dear. Oh, I'm. Just keep it simple. You don't have to talk about yourself any differently. The tall woman kneeled in front of Ochako, thankfully so, since she was starting to gain a crick in her neck. I'm Uraraka Ochako. Nice to meet you, Dividasi-san. The bubbly girl bowed deeply, causing the moon-haired woman to blush happily. As much as I love being called servant of the all-effulgent goddess, it would be easier if you were to call me Ekarani, since we are all Dividasis here. Oh, okay. Ochako once again bowed at the formidable woman, whose taste matched her own. Little did she know, but Ochako had met her first Lunarian. She would meet the rest tomorrow during the super early morning ceremony. But this information would be realized quite a few months later since, at the moment, and due to quirks being so widespread, Ochako only saw them as those super nice cultists who agreed to house her, instead of the dangerous apartment her parents had chosen for her in the worst part of Musutafu. Speaking of morning, tilde 0 tilde. The sound of ringing bells met Ochako's ears. Not that this should have woken her up since, she was from an expanded family, and her half-sibling all had their own personal schedules. But for some reason, this very faint sound woke her up. Who the hell would ring a bell at? She checks her old Caterpillar phone. 3:45 in the morning. Like, What the fuck's wrong with him? She mumbled as she glared at her clock, unable to fall asleep. Not because she had not been about to well, she still had the realization that she was not this body. But at the same time, she had no idea who she was other than a servant of Krishna. And this woke her up. Right. I'm not this body. I'm the spirit soul locked away in there. Better start my service to him then. Ain't gonna waste any more time in this shitty place. The brunette thought as she threw off her blanket and made her bed. They were all sleeping on the floor, something quite unusual in Japan since America once again became the strongest country in the world financially speaking. Then went to look for the rest of the cultists, wondering what type of ceremony they were performing at ass o'clock in the morning. She followed the sound to the house's main room, the living room, and indeed, light streamed from the shoji door. Ochako could also hear, mumbling, "No. What is it? Hala. KLSHNA? Lama." Suddenly the door slid open, and a silver-haired woman, not Ekarani, another one with short hair and a silver and blue sari. Also, were her eyes blue or red? Also, what was that mark on her forehead? Oh, Uraraka-san. Hare Krishna, good morning. She folded her palms. I don't think we've had met yesterday, but you may call me Izio Sakuya. Oh, that's a Japanese name. Ochako blurted out. She had already noticed that most had their own. Foreign names like Ekarani, Kakila, and Madan Mohana Mohini, and always ending in Dividasi. Yes. She blushed as she sighed elegantly. Gurudeva has yet to manifest. But I know one day it will. She spoke brightly. Now, enough about me. What are you doing up so early in the morning? Not that waking up to attend Mangala Arati is bad. Mangala? Arati. We greet the Lord after he and his Radha sleep. Or, in our case, Gauranga and Nityananda. Miss Izio explained kindly. But, before you do, it is advised that you bathe and cover yourself in clean clothes. It is God, the cleanest and purest we are about to see, after all. Oh, right. She was about to see her master and... Come, let me bath you quickly. What? Tilde 0 tilde. When Sakuya had said that she would bathe Ochako quickly, she meant it. Since after a blink, the brunette was bathed, massaged with fragrant oils, dressed in a silken sari expertly folded, decorated with a few tasteful ornaments and makeup, and back in the room, as if nothing had happened. This had prompted the teen to ask the elegant and perfect woman about her quirk, only for her to tell Ochako that this wasn't a quirk, but the magic from an artifact and the blessing of Kala, Time himself, who just so happens to be an illusionary aspect of God, Krishna, who is now on their altar as Gauranga. It was super interesting, but also way too esoteric for Ochako's taste. It was still 4 in the morning, way too early to have Sakuya explain the nature of the absolute truth, especially to a soul that had just woken up to the fact that she was not this body, but, well, an eternal soul wearing a flesh suit whose bodily blueprint was made out of karma, time, and reactions to said karma. And misery. Let us not forget miseries. 15 minutes later, and the sound of a pair of crutches echoed in the hallway, heralding the arrival of Deku. Actually, her name was Izuku, but since her identity had changed, she let one of her friends choose it for her. At first, Ochako thought it meant useless princess. And in a way, it did, since Deku would never be able to bear children. But at the same time, it was the name of the Deku princess, a spitfire that lived in the Deku Palace in The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask. Yes, her friend was a geek. And Ochako just so happens to like geeks, especially esoteric ones. Haim's here, Momoyo declared as she and another blonde woman carrying a sword went to open the door for her. Hare Krishna, Haim. And indeed, there she was, wearing an ethnic dress, a green and black sari, and her ever-present ko-omode mask. Apparently, Ochako's friend had to wear it to hide her identity. lest she was discovered. Something about how it was connected to her, losing her ability to procreate. For Ochako, it sounded like a dream since, kids cost money. But hey, I'm not this body, and whatever money will come when the time is right. So I don't need to stress out about it. Besides, it's my parents who have the financial problems, not me. Oh, Chakoken, Izu-chan spoke with surprise. Hare Krishna, are you also going to participate in the Mangala Arati? Yep. No choice. The brunette spoke with a strained smile. The bell woke me up. That's weird, Izu-chan commented with a tilt of her mask. We usually don't ring the bell that loud since we don't want to disturb our closest neighbor. I heard he had a nasty temper and was prone to burn houses down and blame it on faulty electrical outlets. They may be fearless and overpowered, but lest it was a truly evil man whose powers came close to their own, then better not disturb him too much. Actually, another woman spoke up. The black-skinned one. Madri did ring the bell this morning. She told me she saw a few too many ghosts around. Beside, Yo Daddy made this place as fireproof as he could. Behind her mask, Deku smiled. Right, in case of what? One of my aunt and mother figures is an arsonist. Sometime, she just has to burn something. Oh. Deku clapped her hands together. But she is still a devotee of the Lord and very dear to Lord Krishna. Without her, I would not be so well raised and loved. Now, speaking of Krishna, I believe the Arati is about to start. And indeed, the priestess, a young girl wearing an ice-white sari that complemented her long silver, braided hair, blew a conch 3 times, then pulled the curtains open. All bowed, save for Ochako, who was caught in the Lord's beauty. And indeed, for those pure souls who regained their divine eyes. Serving the golden form of Goranga with hands open, freely giving his causeless mercy to all, including her, a fallen soul, a marginal potency who fell for the trap of Maya. Tears fell from her eyes, the best offering one could give to God. ~0. And thus, the week passed by in the most mundane way possible for Haim. She would wake up at the same time, every morning. And every morning, a maidservant would help her bathe and dress. Then she would attend Mangala Arati. Only this time, there was Chakoken too. It was a joy to see her take to Krishna consciousness. Something not many could do despite this being the default state of all souls. Krishna consciousness really was what was written on the thing. You were conscious of Krishna, of God, of what he did, of his devotee, and more importantly, of what would make him happy. The name of the game was not how to have as much pleasure you could afford before death took everything away, but how to please Krishna eternally. And it was the most simple thing ever. It was just like reigniting a relationship long lost due to someone not Krishna. You had to start by calling him, and you would do this for Krishna by chanting his holy names. The Hare Krishna Maha Mantra of 16 syllables. The greatest sin ever committed was to be separated from God and to enjoy what was his. And this was the reason most were here. Some had other reasons. But Krishna was not the cruel and merciless God who would smith the infidel. He was not one to be feared, but one to be loved. And thus, the path of Bratkai started by calling him, using the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. And then, when the lines of communications were open, and depending on how much you were willing to sacrifice to have your friendship back, Krishna would slowly, shyly re-establish the relationship. Of course, those sacrifices were not drastic as giving up blood and one own babies on an altar of sacrifice, killing them like Abraham almost did his son Jacob. No, the greatest sacrifice one could perform in this most fallen age of Kali, a time where not mantras that held no powers, and no Brahmana could chant them perfectly. Where big, lavish sacrifice only ended in deaths and ashes, and in which yoga was only for a show of gymnastic and meditation, but a tool for mental well-being in a time of duress. And none of those were practiced to return back home, back to Godhead, back to Krishna. The real, original reason for all fasting, austerities, donations to good causes, charity, and deity worship. No, in this fallen age of Kali, performance of those practices was the same as pouring oil onto ashes. No matter how hard you tried, you would never get fire. No, the religion for this age, the one true and ever-potent sacrifice, was the chanting of the holy name of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. It was the best meditation. Dancing to it was the best asana. The time given to it him was the best of sacrifice, and since Krishna and his names, especially his main one, then the performance of this sacrifice was the same as perfectly worshipping his form. And what a form it was! So as I was saying, Chakakan, the main practice we do to please Krishna is to perform Haranam Sankirtana. She explains, her friend. One Friday afternoon as she and a few other otherworldly women made their way to one of the busiest streets of downtown Musatafu. There, an interesting mix of overindulgence and utter misery lumbered around. So, what's Halanama Sakyatail? The shorter woman asked, expertly butchering the name. Harinama Sankirtana. Deku enunciated carefully. It's the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in group and in public. She explained. It's super fun. You sing, and you dance with your hands up in the air. Is it even legal here? Ochako fretted. Rubbing her hands together, every finger had a ring that would prevent her quirk from activating. A simple thought was all that was needed to be able to reverse gravity again. It was a gift from Uma Devi Dasi, Deku father. A woman. Last I heard, every and all demonstrations were banned by the Hero Public Safety Commission. Both were dressed in opulent and colorful saris, with the tilaka proudly glowing on their forehead. Yes, Deku spoke tersely. But not on private property, she spoke innocently. It was hard for Ochako to get a read on her new friend and housemate since she never removed the creepy no mask, at all. Oh, by the way, I think we're here, she said as she showed Ochako a private parking lot where a building once stood. Well, legally, it was a parking lot, but it was used by quite a few sari-wearing people, and even some men wearing Indian clothes. Suddenly, the one in the red sari decorated with a huge ceremonial rope rose up to her full size and turned around. Haim gasped, her hidden eyes wide as she literally launched herself toward the blue-haired, slightly serpentine woman with abandon. Calling her a name Ochako would never have guessed in a million years. Mama. ~0. Back in UA, it was the final meeting before school started. And thus, Mainta Minoru, Bakugu Katsuki, and Moriya Izuku will be in Class 1A under heavy surveillance. Nedzu spoke from his podium. Shout aside, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulder and hating those kids before he'd even met them. Save for Miss Moriya, of course. Just in the entrance exam alone, she had managed to show herself to be an ideal hero. Someone who had experience dealing with this type of situation where all hell broke loose and nothing but your wits and ability could get you out alive. Then she used quirks, plurals, to not only ace it, but while having fun while doing it and saving a student from certain death by stabbing her with an ancient Taoist sword that had been lost to time and considered a myth. They had all seen her prowess, the skills and poise she possessed, and the sheer madness that animated her. He would not be surprised if she would fly to Nedzu and request the time and ask him why he was not running late for his very important date. Or some other trash like that. Also, for some obscure reason, when Nedzi went to tail the trans girl to her home, only to forget what he was supposed to do and go back home to sleep and cuddle with his cat. He'd only remembered his failed mission when Nedzu asked him what he'd found about the girls. Needless to say, This had been Shouda's worst moment as a professional. Shouda let out a heavy sigh as he rubbed his face. All right, so we know Miss Moria has multiple quirks, and from what we've gathered from Yagi-san, or powerless and dying All Might, why was he still fighting? What was it so hard to admit that he'd been severely wounded, and thus could not continue fighting on the front line? The only one who's ever had more than one quirk had been one for all, the boogeyman of the underworld. Gasps rippled throughout the room, with whispered about how it was impossible. The boogeyman of the underworld was dead. All Might had killed him, avenging his mentor. It was common knowledge. So why are we keeping this kid in UA and not interrogating him? Wouldn't Tartarus be better? Sakuro-kan sneered. I could handle the Spitfire and this. What is he? A dwarf? And why are we keeping this perv here? I take that his desire to mate with powerful females is frowned upon then, Nedzu grinned. Besides, Moria-san is quirkless, as confirmed by both Shouda and her medical file. The thing grinned, meaning that whatever they are using is not a quirk, and it's also not from a support item. There was quite an interesting tale here, one I cannot wait to see unfold. For his part, Aizawa Shouda just buried his whole face in his scarf, ignoring the rest of the meeting as he mentally prepared for the new torture. New school year. He was not looking forward to this one. And since he was given the instruction to not expel anyone in his class, this year they trough he was being too critical. Well, excuse him for trying to evacuate would-be child soldier from the meatball machine. He could not even plan to expel those three. It would be too dangerous to have this quirkless anomaly run free. Magical Deku 3. ~0. The rest of the week came and went, and both girls received their admission to the most prestigious school in the country. Dekuheim had shown her friend how to chant kirtana and dance in front of God. No, twerking is not a valid dance move in any situation. But bunny hopping and the Swami step is, and how to play karatala. At first, Ochako had struggled with her quirk, but with one call to her father and the round-faced girl became the proud owner of a pair of thumb rings that could turn her quirk on and off, spelled in a way that, short of losing her thumb, nothing would be able to dislodge them. They were also rather timeless, meaning they would look good with anything. Also, Haim learned that, after she had been let out by Yamuna-sama to the outside and dull world of quirks again, more had followed, using her as a sort of anchor to bypass the curse of denial existence =death curse. Dekuheim, having been raised by one father and numerous mothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, was a proper Jinsakian with some rather average magic. Simply flight and your average Danmaku. She could have gotten a special ability, but instead elected to use those two rather underwhelming abilities and hone them to perfection. And then, the rest of her friends and family provided her with spell cards that would use their abilities, meaning that if she wished to nuke Japan, she could nuke Japan with a freshly born star. Not that she would, of course. Nevertheless, with her also being born from the outside world, she was in between the two, sitting on a very special border. And border Yamuna-sama had cultivated and attempted to breach centuries ago. The last attempt introducing quirks to the general population. As she said, it had been a mistake to try and bypass her old work through Makai. But no use crying over spilt milk, especially if it was something even she could not change back. Or would not, considering it was Yamuna. Nevertheless, it meant that more Jinsakian were discovering the horrors of modern Japan, and many of them had taken up vigilantism on top of spreading Krishna consciousness, because the heroes were doing it wrong. Anywho, none of those who'd taken this path were qualified to attend any hero school since all were too old. And you know what's even more illogical? Dekuheim ranted as she and Ochako walked and mildly floated for Haim. Her hips were painful today. And yet she knew magical abilities used in public were still considered illegal and vigilantism. Also, why couldn't vigilantes be seen as bounty hunters for villains? Like, if the numbers of villains kept rising, Why not the numbers of those who could take them down without any bells and whistles, and practically for free? And if the authority quoted illegal use of a quirk, and they could hurt others, hurt themselves, and kill the villains? Well, same as heroes. She missed the Good Samaritan laws of her home country. It meant that fewer people wanted to risk being mobbed. No. What is even dumber than illegal citizen arrest and illegal quirk usage? Also, the whole policy on illegal quirk usage was bullshit. Why prevent the citizens from expressing their inner magic? And why aim to have more and more powerful quirks when it was obvious that the non-demonized human body could not handle some of those spell abilities? And what to say of children that developed deadly abilities with no one to teach them how to use them? No, instead, those children were labeled as villains, while those with underwhelming magic or mutations too great to be ignored were deemed waste, trash, and useless. Despite being raised in Gensaikyo, Deku never forgot the 4 years of hell she went through at the hands of her peers and teachers. While she knew it was her karma, it did not mean she would not try to do something about the whole situation. Krishna willing, of course. Beside her, Ochako giggled, the customized Yua uniform dancing with the light breeze. Wow, Deku-chan, you have a whole lot of plan here, girl, she drawled, now more comfortable with her heavy accent that she knew what she was. Haim blushed. When excited, her mouth would spill out whatever was happening in her mind. Thankfully, the art of Damnaku had taught her to keep her mouth close while in combat. A mouthful of flying insects never was a pleasant experience, save for the birds. So, as I was saying before I got off track, is that with all this rise of hoodlums and villainy, it's absolutely illogical to have such a highly restrictive triage as to what can be a hero. Deku resumed. They only want marketable people, those who look pretty and have flashy quirks and flashier costumes. They don't want soldiers, warriors who have truly trained in the art of fighting and killing, but characters from comic books who uphold so-called Christian-Buddhist morals about not killing those who have killed. By the way, the Christen Crusade is still seen as the deadliest campaign ever known to man's mind. Nevertheless, this means that heroes will always be weaker than the villains since they have to control their output so as not to kill, while the villains have no reasons not to, leading to more casualties than any sane warrior could ever permit. Not just that out, the whole thing about declaring your special attacks is just plain stupid. But, didn't you declare your attack? Ochako asked, feeling confused at the word vomit, and by Haim's apparent hypocrisy. Spell cards have to be declared since it is super potent magic. What you saw me use in the exam were non-spell cards and silent spell cards. Those are usually the least lethal, and used as a cool-down period before the Damnaku artist casts another big one. It's a safeguard since, some of us can manifest moons, suns, and other deadly attacks. Like the Yamuna, she will train people she doesn't like. Or like, depending on her mood. Or Otara Dividasi, who holds an entire star. As it is, her power in nuclear fusion. Yikes, that's mighty scary. It is. Deku nodded sagely, her face hidden behind her mask. Then she tilted her head. Now that I think about it, calling out your attacks is a way to warn others to get out of the way. Unfortunately, you guys mostly use it to appear fancy. I rarely see any attack meant to kill anymore, and no side watcher has any power to set up a barrier, and all would rather gawk at the destruction than run. She sighed as she and her friend approached. Nevertheless, there is another illogical thing the hero culture is praising, and it is to keep the villain alive, sending them to Tartarus where they rot, and their DNA is stolen from them. It's quite a ghoulish place that my Yama friend wants to see destroyed. And it makes no sense to keep those sinful persons waiting for death in Tartarus when it would be safer and more merciful to kill them on the field. I swear, keeping all those villains in one place is just begging for trouble. Don't I know it now? Ochako nodded sagely as the two girls readily ignored the ogling the student body gave them. I know it's the same principle for heroes. But why should a hero follow etiquette when villains won't? She asked as she moved her arms. Just like in the Mahabharata, the moment the warriors fighting for the Kauravas ganged up on Abhimanyu, killing his most ignobly. In the Dhanurveda, all fighting was one-on-one and between warriors of equal strength, and you can't help nor impede another warrior. She explained. The fighting has to happen during the daylight, and one cannot hit below the belt. But I thought Bhima struck Dhritarashtra in the balls with his big fat mass. She asked as she blatantly ignored the student gawking at their long dress. Purity was the force, after all. Yes, he did. But you have to understand that God's will and desire go above all Vedic rules. Krishna asked Yudhishthira to lie, but Yudhishthira upheld his vows of truthfulness. And at the end of his life, he saw hell from a single moment. But a moment in hell can last 1,000 years. You also have to understand that at this time in the wars, the villains had stopped following the divine rules of fighting, and thus the unwritten rules were activated. The Pandavas began to fight dirty also. But unlike the Kauravas, they had Krishna, the father of all religions, giving them his blessings. Also, the unwritten rule is that you must match your opponent's level of aggression. If it's play fighting, you play fight. And if you fight to the death, you fight to the death. Got it? And you match them 1 for 1. Ochako smashed her fist in her hand for emphasis, looking positively feral. Did Deku tell you how much she adored Ochako? Well, she did now. Eventually, they reached the eponymous classroom that would have the honor of surviving 3 years with those two in her hold as they go through the hero course. Damn, now those are some big-ass doors right here. Ochako drawled as he looked to the very top of those monstrous sliding doors. I wonder why. I mean, some mutated students are bigger than average, but those are too rare. And I don't think Miss Takayama even attended UA, so I believe it's the principal trying to compensate for something. Like what? His height? Ochako asked as she pushed the door open to admit her friend in, since it was not automatic. I have heard from a friendly wind that he was indeed rather small. And what in the world is our teacher doing sleeping on the ground? Haim exclaimed loudly as she stared with outrage through the rather expensive eyes of her mask at the yellow sleeping bag on the ground that could only belong to their teacher. Of course, now that he had been outed, Aizawa Shouta was known to Sakuya and Kalindi Devidasi and her dead sister. The ever-depressed man with a desire for a slow, pathetic death. Seriously, what was the man thinking? He was working 2 jobs, not something unheard of nowadays, and quite sadly. But the fact that one of his jobs was daytime and the other a night job that could get both physically and emotionally demanding meant that he had nothing else to give. This was one of Kalindi's biggest gripes about the man, and how he was overly broody and clearly suffered from depression, and yet did nothing to get out of this state. The man, looking and smelling like an unclean Emleka. When was the last time he bathed? He got out of his bag and gave a red glare at the princess of Gensokyo. One of them, at least. You're going to be a problem child, aren't you? Only if you turn out to be a problem teacher. She shot back primly, making some students snicker, and one, the tallest young man in the group, got up and started berating her for her lack of respect for their teachers. But Haim did not desire to make the scene any longer. He was still her teacher for now, and if push came to shove, she could easily record his behavior and give them to those it may concern. But then came another problem. Her desk was the same generic desk with the same generic seat, meaning it would cause her immense amounts of pain if she were to sit in that. Joy. Well, at least the young man sitting in front of her was quiet. His green hair was definitely a dye job. And did he draw freckles on his face? Weird. But all right. This was modern-day Tokyo, and people liked to cover their faces with layers of dangerous makeup to make up for the beauty they lacked. Still, to return to her seat, it was one of those uncomfortable, mass-produced school chairs that would cause back pain and problems in the students. and for Heim. She couldn't sit in without suffering in agony. Is there any problem? Shouta asked. And Deku Heim began to regret how rude she had been to him. This would be her superior for the next 3 years. And she, as a Vaishnavi, was supposed to give respect to all, something she had neglected for this man. And I shall now receive my due. Yes, sensei. You see, I can't sit in a chair like this. It would make my pain worse. Then, if this is going to be a bother, there's always the door. The teacher smirked sadistically. Obviously, he needed some lessons from Yuthika Dividasi about that. Right? But I can't sit properly on a door. Then she tilted her head to the side. Actually, a flat surface would be perfect, but I fear the classroom door may be too big. Thank you, sensei, for reminding me that we have a perfectly good floor. She bowed as she gently lowered herself belly down on the floor. With some magic, of course. Aizawa stared at her bemusedly. But before he could say anything, the tallest and broadest boy in the classroom, with Shyama blue hair and glasses, got up, moving as stiff as Yoshika. This is completely unacceptable, he declared as he violently chopped in his hand. The moment you have entered this classroom, you have disrespected our teacher. Then you are blatantly making fun of him. This is a terrible way to start your school years, Miss Moria, and I wouldn't be surprised if you were expelled in the next hour or so. Now get off the floor. Sensei told us where to sit. Oh, really? Dekuheim would not blame him. She was so nervous today. Well, I thought sticking myself to the door would not be a good idea since, you know, I would get hurt every time the door would open. Oh, Krishna. She really wanted to disappear into the ground. She was terrible at this. Then she heard Aizawa-sensei sigh. You know what? You're fine where you are. Just grab your gym clothes and come find me at Training Ground Beta for your quirk assessment test. Their teacher said as he got up from the floor and dropped his dirty yellow sleeping bag. He needed a new one. The poor man was definitely a charity case, and wordlessly made his way out the room. You have 10 minutes to get there. A young woman, she looked older than most, who had the same power as Sunny Milk, raised her hand. But sensei, how about orientation? She reasonably asked. It would be a waste of time. U.S. pretty liberal about what a teacher can do, plus ultra and all that. Dekuheim raised her. She shot a Damnaku up, a white one that flashed green. No quirk usage in the classroom. Aizawa-sensei spoke in a bored tone. Huh. This never happened in my old school. Well, about that. This was magic, and I don't have a quirk. Is there another teacher that could give me orientation, then? Aizawa stared. Then his eyes turned red, and his hair began to float around his head, pushed by his latent psionic powers. If Aizawa-sensei would have been quirkless, he would give Sabrina a run for her money. The tired man's shoulders slumped as he leaned on the desk. You are to be evaluated for your physical prowess. Ah, then I supposed I should just pack my things then, since I'm a rather squishy wizard. ~0. Shouta started at the supreme problem child as he felt his mind melting, cursing Nezu to a slew of animal torture. First, she walked in with her friend in a longer skirt than permitted. A clear sign of delinquency. But he could overlook that. Nezu had prohibited him from expelling anyone this year, especially Bakugo, Mainta, and, of course, Moria. Bakugo looked like a madman. His green dyed-haired and painted freckles were one thing he could leave as an eccentricity. But wearing a pin asking if they had seen someone looking like him took the cake. Not only that, but despite having a quirk, the boy managed to pass the exam quirkless and on rescue points alone. Then daring to not have him in the hero course because of that, calling out Nezu for the fact that there were no quirkless students despite him saying that quirkless students were allowed, and then calling the sadistic rat out on the fact that he had hidden this information so thoroughly in the website that it would take a hefty amount of moon logic to get there. How this Bakugo managed to find that, Shouta could only speculate. But one thing was for sure. Those eyes did not hold insanity, but grief and righteous anger at the world. He may have to keep an eye on him. Maybe set him up with a counselor. And how about that doll he always had on him? With black, green hair. The one with the diamond-shaped freckles. Was it a video game character of something? Or maybe a dating sim character with how innocent he looked? Then there was Minta Minoru. Or the underground hero Japtus. He was retired after he got hit with a permanent shrinking quirk. But instead of taking his fall hard, he instead chose to test the girls and boys on how they would react to sexual harassment. No one knew to save for the faculty. And every year, his ACE-verified cohort would harass the students and see how they would react. Would they seek help? Would they fight? Or would they just take it silently? Many would be surprised to fail that test, and Kayama would pick up the slack. True, it was underhanded, but it was effective. What was the point in teaching those young girls how to fight when they would be eaten whole by the creeps and the press? Same as those boys. And Shouta would do everything he could to ensure they could survive, even if it were underhanded. And maybe he liked the cringe comedy that would come out of it. Nothing wrong with being sadistic. Hell, his own homeroom teacher was Nedzu, the most non-villainous sadist on earth. So it was all right, right? He was stalling, wasn't he? His gaze returned to the second, and yet foremost of his problem children, this year. Moriya Izuku. For a moment there, he thought it was Midoriya Izuku, a kid that had disappeared under nebulous circumstances, the last place he had been seen alive, having gone up into smoke after the little quirkless creep, as told by his classmates. Well, Shouta had a very intense love-hate relationship with those. He hated them since the only time he would see and interact with a quirkless person was when he had to talk them out of unaliving themselves. Sometimes more than once at night. And he loved them since they were some ridiculously smart and resilient fuckers once they got their will to live back. Seriously, just give them the proper tech, and they could even outperform All Might if given the chance. But this Moriya-san, she resembled the boy. Their age matched also. But, well, his gut feeling told him no. This trans woman, the quirkless trans girl, was not the latest quirkless cold case. She was a suicide migraine made manifest. Why was Shouta thinking that? Well, since the seat was late, no, he was not that cruel. Even if he thought heroism was no place for a handicapped hero ectoplasm, notwithstanding, he was retired, for crying out loud. But Moriya-san was an anomaly Nedzu desired to keep close to his chest. And Shouta could understand the logic behind that. Better you keep the devil close than far away. Still, it didn't mean that he wouldn't try to make the girl give up since, with her injuries, she wouldn't survive on the field. But Shouta felt that this magical cultist was not bound to any rules of this world. And thus, the newly acquired Chaos Gremlin would do as she pleased. Oh well, he had been tasked to keep an eye on her and follow her home if needed. More work for him. But then, All Might sucked at tailing people. You may use your magic also. Or you can go to Class 1B and have your orientation here. The rest, you have 5 minutes. Anything later than that, and it's immediate expulsion. That said, Shouta turned his heel as he listened to the mad scramble to the changing room. He grinned. Maybe this year won't be so bad despite Moriya-san and Bakugu-san. Behind him, Kakilla, the closed eyes Satori, chuckled, causing Shouta to look behind him, finding nothing. ~0. In Dekuheim's opinion, Class 1B was definitely a treasure trove of interesting abilities. There was this girl who could make her hands grow, a young man who could travel in shadows, while another one with a rather repetitive name could turn into iron, a girl who could separate her body parts, and a blonde prideful boy who could copy others' abilities. I wonder if this is the true gift of the quirkless. If the magical orbs are still in effect, then I wouldn't be surprised if the urban legend that the quirkless could take other people's quirk would come true. She mumbled to herself after storing the second notebook she had filled that day. True, it was nothing Krishna conscious, except to Ibara-san they had an argument about whether Jesus was God or not. And while Haim knew Ibara-san to be dead wrong, the poor delusional girl thought the son and the father to be the same. Poor Ishaputra. He'd given his life for them, and look what they have done to him. Still, eventually, Ibara stormed off, cursing out Krishna as if he was the devil incarnate. It was rather funny, if not extremely sad. Nevertheless, she was done with her quirk assessment test, and she had to admit that she felt bad for them. Since it was mostly physical, she requested the aid of Ibuki-suki, the tiny oni who could turn into an army. Oh, Deku also did the grip strength, ball toss, long jump, and the 2 races and came atop the races and jumped by herself. Needless to say, Sakuro-sensei had asked Haim to use her quirk, and Haim had told him that she couldn't use what she didn't have, and that her magic was limited to flying, danmaku, and summoning friends, just as she had written on her inscription paper. It was now after the fact. Haim didn't care about her score since she knew she was in terrible shape regarding her lower body. Those boys and girls had made sure of that. Nevertheless, Haim had fun and made a few friends along the way, which was the important part. It was easier to invite friends to partake in the Lord's sacred prasadam than complete strangers. For this, they needed a temple to do that. At the end of the day, she had the school's map, knew of all the safety procedures, knew where the emergency exits and where the fire extinguishers were. She had also visited a certain recovery girl who, without even trying to be discreet about it, tried to recruit her to help in her hospital. Haim declined, saying that if she couldn't chant Hare Krishna as she worked, then the Shichasaiken would only kill, and that having a perfect healer in a superpower school heal every small scrap and bruise without teaching about the true nature of the soul would turn those hopefuls in a bunch of reckless cowards. Chiyobasan had burst into rancorous laughter at that, and gave the girl her exam, later vowing to hunt down those who had dared desecrate Haim's body like that. Well, Deku Haim could somehow remember them, including a kaken. But this was as far as she could remember, time and trauma having erased most of it. Good riddance. After receiving a good bill of health obviously, saved for a badly healed pelvic bone and missing genitals obviously again, Izuku was sent to return home. Not before giving Chiyobasan Ekarani's phone number since it was obvious the poor elder was overwhelmed and overworked, snapping at anyone who came to her. Seriously, nurses and doctors were the most important, and yet the most maltreated of all professionals, save for porn actresses, customer service, and models. And thus, after a rather productive day, just not devotionally, Haim floated away from Yua, wondering if Ochako had waited for her at the gate. And indeed, there she was, waiting for her with the green-haired boy and his Ain Izuku doll. Chako-chan noticed the floating girl and energetically began to wave at her, while the quiet boy, who just so happened to have a frightening resemblance to Kazami Yuthika. His green eyes and perpetual sad scowl reminded Izuku of Kaken. Not that she remembered Kaken very much. Something about him being a childhood friend who got vicious as he grew up. Who knows, maybe this was him. Maybe he had changed. Hare Krishna, Haim, Ochako greeted with a bounce. How was your first day? Where did you go anyway? Didn't you do your test? Haribal, Chakoshin. Haim greeted back as she gently landed on the ground, using her crutches to stabilize. So, who is this gentleman? Somebody I know. This is Bakugo Katsuki. He wanted to meet you. Ochako gestured to the teen, who was holding his. Oh, that's Kaken. I see. Haim smiled behind her mask. A nervous reaction. She could reveal herself to him. But at the same time, did he grow up? Why did he dye his hair? Why did he hold a doll in her old image as a boy? Like the one she used to have when learning to accept her new reality. But before she could form a suitable answer, a car violently pulled up to the curb. Being trained in fighting, Deku was already a foot up in the air, her shot type primed and ready to rain hell on whoever dared to think she was an easy kill, only to have Bakugo-san yank her down. "Don't. It's my mom." He spoke in the most resigned voice Haim had the misfortune of hearing. Huh. If this is how he feels about his mom, is she worse than a demon? It sounds to me like he's heading to the sunken hell of blood and filth. A woman stormed out of the expensive-looking car, slamming the door behind her with enough force to make the whole thing rock back and forth. "Katsuki," she screeched like a banshee as she descended on the boy like a rabid tigress on an unsuspecting human. "I fucking told you not to dye your goddamned hair, you waste of sea." Then she stopped dead in her tracks. It was like watching unbounded Rumia get distracted by something shiny on her way to slaughter the human village. Actually, unbounded Rumia was sort of okay once you got to know her, unlike the raging woman. "Oh, hello there." The strange woman greeted, her whole demeanor doing a 180. Her ruby-red gaze went over both Haim and Ochako's bodies with too much intensity. She was like a predator gauging her latest treasure. Not even Sega looked that bad anymore, having mellowed out a lot after she began to practice bhakti. Haim hated this. Ochako was more than skin stretched over a construct of fat, blood, and stools. "My name is Bakugo Mitsuki, but you may call me Mitsuki Oba." She greeted pleasantly as she yanked her boy beside her. "Wait. Like the old hero popular ado. Yes, I was a model. That was until I got knocked up, if you know what I mean," she muttered as she tightened her grip on her unfortunate son. "I'm sorry for the result." Oh, Haim didn't like the implications. "So, what did my useless son do to you, ladies?" Bakugo-san asked. And Katsuki-sen flinched. "He was about to walk with us back home. I heard this morning that a creepy dude with staples holding everything was lurking." "Lurking, dear." Bakugo-san sneered. "Honestly, you sound like a country bumpkin. Learn how to speak properly. You are in Musutafu, not Kansai. I'm from Okinawa. But sure, I'll learn Sanskrit." Ochako, bless her heart, spoke like an angel. "But yeah, Katsuki here was about to escort us ladies back to our place on Sokoto. Pretty little piece of heaven this is." The brunette spoke with an exaggerated accent, probably enjoying making fun of the illusioned soul. "Oh, is that so?" Bakugo-san asked with a predatory glint barely hidden in her worrying red eye. "Well, why don't you girls hop in, then? I'll drive you there." "It's quite all right, mother. But I can always call my chauffeur to get us. We just wanted to take in the nice afternoon air and sun." "Well, you told me it was dangerous." "Neither of us knew until your brave and courageous son warned us of the danger, offering his assistance and protection during our transit." Bakugo-sen scoffed. "This fucking weakling?" She harshly jerked Katsuki's arms, making him wince in pain. "This good-for-nothing ass won't use his fucking quirk. There's no way he could have helped you ladies at all, for all I know. For all you know, we are a couple of pretty models ripe to be exploited by you. And your son is ruining the narrative you had. So no, leave us alone before my chaperone gets mad." Deku could not help herself as she bristled and took to the sky. "Now leave. But know that my friends are everywhere, and will act if you as much as mildly insult your God-given son." "Ah, Haim." Bakugo-sen dropped whatever pretext of being a good mother down, her pleasant mask shattering on the ground. Her sneer was animalistic, showing too many teeth for someone whose sanity was whole. "Now listen here, you little brainwashed bitch," she spat, and Haim swore she saw spittles flying out. "I see talent. I want talent. I could make this plain brown the cover of the best magazine, Have her sit on the lap of the most powerful heroes and drink champagne from a diamond slipper. You're nothing, just an ugly cult whore with no. But Mitsuki's words were muted by a silver blade pressed to her throat. In normal time, I would have drained you of all blood the moment you frowned at Moriyaheim, said Izuku. She wore a coal pinstripe suit and heels that should be illegal by their height. But considering that her time magic permitted many feats that defied the laws of physics and plain old logic, for the maid of the pocket watch of blood, fighting in stilettos just made her even more dangerous. But since you have a son to care for, and innocent eyes are upon us, then I will refrain. Who the fuck are you? Bakugu-san asked as she tried to struggle against Sakuya's hold. I am Smrti Devidasi. But to you, Bakugu Mitsuki, you shall call me Izyo-sama. Fuck you. I'd rather not. I am Moriyaheim's chaperone and bodyguard. Not that there's much I can do in terms of protecting her. Why? That by the knife dug deeper. Just so you know, I am here to stop her from breaking her vows. She shall not kill women, children, and elderly, save for those who deserve to meet Yamaraja early. I, on the other hand. She let the end of her phrase hang like the sword of Damocles. Bakugu-san smirked. So, you're a fucking villain. Figured that the green-haired hoe. A maid. What? I am a maidservant. I simply do what I was tasked to do. And the only reason you still live is because a friend of my mistress has asked me not to bleed you. And I will admit, the smell of your blood. Neither of my mistresses would even touch it with a wingtip. Now, we must leave, Smrti said as she disappeared, carrying Mitsuki with her. And the next thing Izuku knew, she was in the cozy habitacle of her palanquin, belly down on what could only be described as a super soft cloud, giving her arms and legs a break. She gratefully sank into the cushion. Jaya Govinda, she praised. Huh. I thought we would drive home, not carried on some poor schmo's shoulders. Ochako piped up as she leaned back, grabbing her Krishna book from her book bag and returning to her bookmarks. Oh, no one is carrying us on their sore shoulders. Guruguru-san is driving us back to my home on Jiri Sokoto. She addressed Katsuki-kun, who was giving himself whiplash as he tried to take everything in. By the way, may I call you Ka? Katsuki-kun? This woman doesn't deserve the right to share her name with you. The false greenette pierced Deku Heim with his glowing red eye. The fuck happened here? Where are we and why the fuck do you wear a mask? Katsuki asked himself. And by Krishna's sacred and all-powerful name, Heim was oh so tempted to call him Kekken. Yes, those have to be answered. She nodded appreciatively. While her memories were spotty, she could still remember Kekken. He had grown a lot without her. Still, he had asked questions, and it was also an opportunity to test him, to see if he was different from the bully in her past, and to understand why he'd blown up her genitals. What happened here is that I saw you in trouble. As a soon-to-be hero and Keishatrani by nature, to ignore the way your incubator treated you would be adharmic sinful. But my chaperone saved me from having to chastise her. She explained, waiting to see Katsuki's reactions. From what little she remembered, the young boy's mood was as explosive as his quirk, even more so. And he would explode at the mere implication of him being weak and needing help. She saw his lips thin and his brows furrowed. To the side, Ochako sneaked closer, ready to touch him. Or maybe to pummel him in the ground since, being the sole girl of a family of boys, she knew how to fight dirty and efficiently. Then Katsuki took a deep breath in, then gently released it. He did this a few times before he reopened his red eyes again. You'll get in trouble. Mom's got sharks for lawyers. We have the literal law on our side. And we were in Nedzu's sight. The way Madame Bakugu acted, from her body language to how she made to grab you to the traffic infraction she committed by going over the speed limit in a school zone. Suddenly, Haim realized that she'd become the center of amazed and confused attention. Have I said something? Haim-chan. I thought you were super ignorant to anything pertaining to modern culture. Haim blushed under her mask. Well, there's nothing wrong with researching, you know. She blushed as she scratched the back of her neck. I mean, I didn't want to be more of a burden than I am usually. And, I heard tales of foreigners being bamboozled and tilde zero tilde. Katsuki stared at Haim. Deku Haim as she dissolved into a mutter storm. He felt as if he knew her. And yet, nothing triggered. No huge revelation came to him save for the usual dread that came when his mother didn't have what she wanted and had to call her lawyer. No, he did not look forward to facing her again. She would cuff the back of his head T. She would yell and call him names. Call him a disappointment. A little bitch who got attached T a terminal case. That maybe Izuku should have gotten his quirk and left Katsuki to die in the forest instead. He knew it was wrong. Mama Inko never did all that. But this would be a problem for future Katsuki. Right now, he had so many other questions that had to be answered. Why the mask? He abruptly demanded. Feeling the familiar itch in his hand demanding, he ignited his nitroglycerin. You got something to hide. Out of the pan, into the fire. Yeah, Kaken, your luck fucking sucks. He harshly thought to himself. But considering what he did in the past, yeah, that checked out. I do. Haim revealed. Then she began to fidget even more, despite lying on her front. She had suffered a heavy blow to her pelvic area. It was a miracle. And rather badass that she could still fight. Still, Katsuki would rather she chose something safer. Like Izuku. Poor Izuku. So, will you tell us? Katsuki demanded in a somewhat belligerent way. His day had been shitty. He'd barely had any sleep that night. The quirkist hag had been a pain to deal with in the morning. He had been sitting beside a weirdo on the train and had to deal with Hobo Sensei. Fucking hell. What was wrong with the guy? Last he'd read about Japanese labor law. The hero was super illegal with his time. He just wanted to. He just wanted to go to Izuku's shrine and pray to him. And tell him all about his day. He would get a kick out of Deku Haim's magical quirk. Haim remained silent as she seemed to mull over her answer. Well, I have more than one reason. But before I answer you, and I will, don't worry. I have my own questions to ask. Of course, it would be like that. Sure, can't lose much anyway. Especially now that he knew he would be kicked out of the house. Something he deserved ever since he was 8. All right. Can you tell me why you dyed your hair? And what is this doll all about? And why does it look like you? She tilted her head, the creepy mask not helping the atmosphere. Yeah, it's, mighty suspicious. Round Face asked, before her eyes grew a bit wider in surprise. Hey, wait an effin' minute, Izu, Katsuki froze. How come you know his hair got colored? He still has some green behind his ears and at the back of the neck. Speaking of Katsuki's ears, they were now burning in shame. He had been so careful about it. But this being his first time, mistakes were bound to happen. Katsuki hesitated. The last time he spoke to a shrink about what had happened, he had dismissed him, telling him not to worry, and that he did a great service to humanity. Thankfully, his auntie had quickly dispelled this falsity and given him the straight facts. Don't worry, Kaken. You can tell her. The weird girl, probably an extra, told him. But you better not ask Katsuki how she looked, for he had already forgotten everything about her. He closed his eyes and began his tale of woes. It all started when my only real friend got diagnosed as quirkless. Tilde zero tilde. Back in UA. I want to keep her in my class. Sekiro-ken declared as he slapped his hands on the conference table. She managed to soothe Monama's anxiety. She connected with Ibara over God and his glories. Takage-san is already calling her sister and And this is why Class A1 still produces better heroes out the gate. Vlad, friendship is overrated. Better they focus on training. Aizawa drawled, probably wishing for more coffee, his sleeping bag, or both. We're raising soldiers, not children. It took everything for Ken not to flinch. Soldiers. This was how Aizawa saw children. Kids who had barely begun the most stressful and traumatic time of their lives right before adulthood. Say, how many of your previous class stayed in the hero business? He asked instead, as he tilted his head to the side. I've heard another one of your old students, one you taught to the end of class, committed. Shut up. Ken stared at his colleague. The rage in those two words was raw and unbidden. Then, the insomniac hid his face in his capture scarf, mumbling something about rumors and how most of those he taught would go to underground heroics anyway, away from the paparazzi and other carrion birds. But Ken knew. Kens knew he'd dealt a low blow to the man. The reality of the heroic industry was a rather grim one. The public was fed a romanticized version of what was truly going on. And the thing was, suicide amongst the lower rank heroes. Even the higher ones, there was this rumor about Todoroki and G. But it was so far-fetched, no one truly believed it was high. And this was not counting the other types of deaths. Sorry, that was a low blow, Ken admitted. Sure, he may have built this whole narrative about the epic rivalry between Class A and Class B. But this had gone overboard. A moment of silence passed over the two men as they watched the wind play in the treetop. Nedzu, being an animal, had commissioned the school grounds to be a beautiful, lush forest since he was well aware of their healing properties. So, how many did you want to expel this year? He asked instead, moving to a much safer subject. Aizawa sighed as he rubbed his face tiredly. Is it? Is it really? He sighed in frustration. All of them. I want them all out of this meat grinder and out somewhere being kids as long as they can. Then date, do stupid teenager mistakes. But I can't. The commission caught on to your strategy. They did, Aizawa admitted bitterly, tears pouring from his eyes. But, as you told me, no matter what I do to get them out of their claws, those kids. He let out a sob. If I keep them in UA, then Nedzu can keep them safe from the HPSC. But the moment they have their license, it's over. They belong to them. And if I expel them, stamping a black mark on their file, they can't handle it. Shouda shook his head. No, they. I always made sure they would have option, can. It may not be as glamorous as daytime hero work, but it pays the bill. They are safe. And they can still have a full life. He scrubbed at his eyes angrily. Suicide. Fucking it wasn't suicide, Sekiro. It's never fully a suicide. I check on them, I talk to them. I make sure they know I did what I did for good, and that nothing would happen to them. That they would always have a roof over their head, food in the pantry, the education needed to be someone in the world, and an ear to talk to. He bumped his head in the back wall as he finally let his tears fall from his eyes. It's the commission, that's their mo. The room they were in turned silent as Aizawa recomposed himself and Kan digested what was going on. When he joined the UA student body, the commission had been a force of good men and women who worked to keep the public and heroes safe from harm and debilitating drama, all the while maintaining a strict code of conduct for them and the heroes to follow. But now, we're fucked, aren't we? Aizawa let out a very hollow laugh, a laugh that had more to do with a sob. Not so. I am sure that, if you ask her nicely, my mistress would gladly let me hunt those who are threatening the lives of your students. Both heroes took an embarrassingly long time to react in their warped opinion. That is, to turn around and face whomever the stranger was. A stranger. A trespasser on UA's hallowed ground. And the stranger was a woman with white hair, red eyes, an elegant pinstripe suit, and holding a hostage, Bakugo Mitsuki. The woman looked at the pair of heroes with hope in her desperate eyes. It was quite understandable. Eraserhead activated his quirk. It was all too easy to stop the woman now that she had no quirk to fall back to. Vlad King quickly jabbed his back with his needles and shot his blood toward the white-haired villain. Said villainess raised a brow, and Eraser's eyes suddenly got covered with a soft yet solid cloth. Shackles also bound his wrist and ankles. Thankfully, he was already on the ground and not falling towards it. Vlad, on the other hand, was facing a rather peculiar situation. He was already feeling the effect of mild blood loss, meaning he'd lost a ridiculous amount of it in a ridiculously short amount of time. He stared in fear at the unassuming woman who was still holding Miss Bakugo captive. Now that this is done and over with, my name is Shirada Dividasi, but among the vigilantes, I am known as Sakuya Izuku, the head maid of the Scarlet Devil Mansion, and currently the chaperone of one Moriya Izuku. Then she gave a chilling smile. And I may have been known as Jack the Ripper, maybe. The two men blanched as she deposited the now bound Bakugo Sr. at Vlad King's feet, along with a huge file cabinet. This is Bakugo Mitsuki, best pimp, groomer, and child trafficker aide of Musutafu. I performed a citizen arrest. She took out a silver pocket watch with the moon engraved on it, along with some suspicious brown stain. Sekiro knew blood in every state. Miss Izuku closed her watch decisively, the quiet sound too loud for the two men. It seems that it took me 5 hours to gather all the necessary evidence. And no, none of them are forged, and I will gladly stand scrutiny. But in your time, it took me 30 minutes. The maid of the pocket watch of blood bowed humbly. My apologies. Both heroes stared at the two silent women. Not even Bakugo Mitsuki had retained the ability to speak. Are you a vigilante? Ken asked cautiously as he clutched his head in pain. Blood loss was a bitch to deal with. Well, I am an incident resolver from Gensaikyo. We don't use the terms villains, heroes, and vigilant. If someone can stop an incident, then they stop an incident. And if you start an incident, you are liable to get mobbed by how many incident resolvers are on the case. Once the incident is resolved, we all have a feast in honor of Krishna. The same will happen if the troublemaker has met with death. The elegant maid with a blood-encrusted pocket watch explained, and currently, I see many incidents happening at once, overwhelming you, heroes. She explained with a soft smile. Was it a proud smile? A sardonic one? Ken had no idea. The only thing he knew were the black spot dancing in his vision. The next thing he knew, he looked up to Miss Izuku. He was lying on one of those blood transfusion chairs, his legs raised and covered with a warm blanket. And indeed, he was receiving blood back. Not that cans needed to, since his body could synthesize red blood cells from food thrice faster than a normal and a non-blood quirked person. Nevertheless, he felt less woozy. But I have manipulated time in such a way that you've regained all that was lost and got to rest for a few hours. Your colleague, Sir Eraserhead, is back in his classroom. I let him sleep the hours he so desperately needed, fed him a healthy meal, and helped him sort the case about Miss Bakugo. I'm sorry about the inconvenience. She again bowed before disappearing from Kan's sight. The vampire-like man looked at the ceiling. He felt better, but he now understood another part of Aizawa-san. I will never complain about Aizawa shouted venting about his class, and how it was the first day at school, and yet the chaos, once the students had started, was enough to want to have him give Nedzu his 2-week notice. Also, he could keep Deku Heim. No need to have yet another gremlin princess in his class. Takage-san was enough. Deku Heim 4. In Heim's hellish palanquin, Guruguru came from hell. He was an old cart demon who adored his job at Heim's feet. He was a friend of Yami, the chieftain of Old Hell, and loved to carry around Vaishnavas in need, since Batki ignored everything about one's body and mental form. As long as they ardently desired to please the Lord and his blessed devotees, she would be there. Ochako and Haim waited for Bakugo Katsuki's tale of woes. Haim had some vague remembrance about this traumatic time. But as Savitri had told her, not everything was good to remember. And the mind would do everything in its power to erase and forget some events. Like what had befallen Midoriya Izuku during this one cold evening at the very end of summer. The poor dyed greenette had leaned back on the wall of Guruguru, holding a pillow to his chest and his Izuku doll. It was clear he was dreading what would happen next. Then, after he cuddled and kissed his doll and took a big stabilizing breath, he began to speak. "All right. So, Haim, what do you know about quirks?" he began. "I already know about the ratio and how 20% of humans are born normal." Katsuki nodded. "Yeah, sounds about right. And we all get our quirk when we are 4. Sometimes a bit later." He let out a heavy breath. "I had a dear person who was Q, who was normal." The creaking of the cart and the wheel filled the silence. "At this time, our friendship broke," he admitted sorrowfully. I was such a dumb shit back then. Thought Izuku was better than me. Thought I had to surpass him at everything and..." Katsuki let out a hollow laugh. "For fuck's sake, what was wrong with me? Anyway, I wanted to destroy him, to show the world I didn't need a Q. Quirkless, useless Deku. I started to avoid him, the same as the other kids. But Izuku had no more friends and..." The blonde sobbed. "And I just got worse. People liked it when I insulted him. They praised me the first time I shoved him hard. Hell, I was given a fucking ice cream when I broke his arm, shoving him down the stairs." Katsuki angrily wiped at his eyes. "It was messed up. I knew it was messed up. But I didn't want to stop. I couldn't stop. Or fucked up things would have happened to you." Ochako asked as she brought her knees to her chest. "I don't know. But Ma and Pa didn't stop me. Didn't stop the hag from hitting me and pulling me by the ears." Both girls winced, knowing how many nerves passed through there. "It went on for..." "Yeah, it was 9 when I took things way too far." The palanquin became as silent as a tomb as Katsuki opened his heart. It was the end of summer. The weather was cold at night, but the day had been stupidly hot. As always, I had a bunch of spineless extras nipping at my heels. "And Izuku?" "Who's Izuku?" Ochako asked. And Haim could only praise her father's mask-making skill, for she was, unlike her sister, very expressive. Katsuki took a deep breath in and showed his doll. "Izuku. We grew up together. We weren't born at the same time, not even to the same parents, but our moms were friends." The red-eyed youth spoke quietly. He was so different than the explosive boy from her past. He was fuck. His smile was like sunshine, and he loved quirks so fucking much. Like, the moment he would see one, he would start dissecting it, asking those weird yet deep questions. Thought it was the creepiest thing ever back then. Thought I was the quirk and he would psychoanalyze me. That's what we all thought, anyway. Deku winced. Yeah, she was rather insistent about those quirks. Don't get her wrong. She still loved quirks and theorizing about them sometime, usually with Yamuna. But her subject of interest had grown under the care and tutelage of her friends back at the human village. Like the art of ancient dance, flower arrangement, and danmaku. Oh, and Krishna Katha, of course. Nothing ended nor started the day quite like hearing about a love-filled pastime of Bhagavan, or an awesome one. Just to remember that the baby getting caught stealing butter, or the soaked-to-the-bone youth waiting outside an arboretum for his lover's anger to abate was, and will always be known as Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead, whose part of a part breathed out dream bubbles most commonly called universes, and who was time himself, the destroyer of everything. And he was quirkless. I'm like, today, if you don't have a quirk, you're less than trash, and you get treated as such. There are 20% of them left in the world, but they hide well. They don't even have a safe place to hang out since the last one was targeted by every small-time villain and bored teenagers with a semi-powerful quirk. And no, the police don't do shit. Katsuki spat. It's horrible. It's like the world slid back to the racist era. If you weren't a white European, you were less than humans, or the gays, lesbians, and anything out of the norm. The quirked also had an era like that where they were persecuted. Ochako chipped in. It's like them white, normal humans can't handle the shit that's too weird. Oh no, not just white men. Animals in human skin. Those who have no spiritual knowledge tend to be ignorant bigots. And no, fanatics are not true spiritual practitioners since they are acting on their false pride and false ego. Ochako gave an understanding nod before returning her inquisitive gaze to Katsuki. Taking this cue, Katsuki continued his tale of woes. So yeah, I was an ass to him. Though he was better than me, he always looked down on me. That I had to beat him at anything to be something to my mom. Something better than Izuku. Let me guess, your mother used to compare you with Midoriya-san. Deku Haim spoke up. TCH? Yeah, all the damn time, Katsuki admitted. Even after his death, she kept telling that you were the wrong survivor. I'm not a survivor, Katsuki denied. I'm a murderer, all right. Those older kids, they planned everything. One of them said his dad had this awesome lawyer, and that no one would care if a quirkless hoe was to die. That it was for the new generation, for the evolution of humanity. He spat. Fucking twits. Powerful quirks mean more chances of your body breaking down or death. Hell, I know a website that compiled the real numbers. It ain't pretty. He huffed. They said I could only be a hero if I did a huge service for humanity. He trailed off. And what was this service? Ochako asked. For Haim, she could feel the blasting of the used sandwich bag and his hand on her. The sound, the pain. The smell of blood, urine, and burnt flesh. They had me blow my only friend's dick. 'Cause they didn't want him to reproduce and make more quirkless babies. His voice grew thick. It was my biggest explosion. Broke my arm. Ha, this was some fucking karma. You know. Still, I deserved worse. Once that was done, Deku wasn't breathing. He was. He was losing so much blood, and he was so white. Katsuki's whole body shook as the terrible memory replayed in his head. The other kids, those bastards said something about him being dead. There was bones and tears poured from his eyes as he swallowed. We ran. We all did. We were a bunch of fucking cowards and Kaken. The blonde sobbed. I don't remember how I managed to get home, but I hid it. It was over the weekend and school was out, so I decided to just, stay home and play video games. The hag didn't notice shit. And my old man, he's just hanging around like a dingleberry. He only got his head out of his ass once he noticed I'd broken my arm. When school since started, Izuku wasn't. He still wasn't there. The teacher called his mum and he sobbed more. Katsuki-kun. They were so happy. Those motherfucking hoes were so fucking happy Deku was dead. They were celebrating. And those older kids, they gave me those cigs and booze. Izuku shook her head. I hated it. So I sneaked out and I ran into those woods and I searched for the dilapidated shrine, hoping that somehow I was wrong and that Izuku was still there, still alive. That someone, maybe a spirit, had found him. Or All Might found him. He gave a humorless laugh. To be honest, The idea of All Might beating the shit out of me for being a villain was the worst nightmare I ever had. I'll say. So, I found the shrine, but he was gone. There was no body, no signs that an animal had eaten it, even. I even called the police to confess, telling them what I did. A bitter look of resentment drew itself on his face. They gave me a medal, telling me I've been a good, brave boy, and that they would deal with this as adults. The sound of Katsuki's grinding teeth made even Guruguru unsettled. They swept it under the rug, as if a human's life could be calculated by the worth of his quirk, or the lack of it. He spat, his rage making the entire carriage smell like caramel halava. And then, what did you do? Dekuheim asked with all the authority she could muster. Then, Mom knew what I did. Same as Izuku's mom. Auntie and Co. My mom. That hag tried to play it off, telling me that this was natural selection, eugenics at its finest. Izuku had won a Darwin Award, and I should stop crying about it like a baby. Izuku always had this thing about him. He moved a certain way, spoke a certain way, said he liked Prince Charming better. He was gay? Ochako asked with wide eyes. You got a fucking problem with that round face? Katsuki asked as the smell of burnt sugar became worse. Ochako sent a helpless glance back at Haim, who realized she had to intervene before things went south. She had seen the mom. Now, how was the kid? The soul is not affected by physical or mental gender, let alone one's orientation. But as long as they are not worshipping the lotus feet of Sri Sri Radha Krishna, then even if they are the most religiously accepted in terms of material qualification, then whatever they do is useless. But I thought Krishna was God, so Bhakti's a religion, right? Ochako asked. Dekuheim shook her head. No, it's not. Bhakti Yoga is the ancient science of self-realization, and it stands above mundane religion, using its head as a stepping stool. Now please, Katsuki, keep going, don't mind us. Haim quickly added, cursing all those fanatics and gatekeepers for having turned something natural and wholesome into something only their self-chosen elite could reach. Idiots. Katsuki made a sound at the back of his neck, piercing Dekuheim with his anger-filled eyes. Listen. I can't say that you can't practice Batki, or that being divergent is a sin since I'm a divergent too. And Izuku. While it was his karma, what happened to him, and you were still horrible, and never should have happened in the first place. Yes, she was speaking for herself. But it was true. While it had been her karma, it had also been the fault of many men and women who shirked their dharma of child educator and protector of the weak. It's truth. She had deserved every single moment. It had been traumatic. But it meant that she had done the same previously to those souls, many, many human lives away, and had paid the price in this particular lifetime. And thankfully, since she had taken to Krishna consciousness, her karmic wheel was broken, meaning she could never make more karma, only burn it. Katsuki closed his eyes. There's nothing much for me to say here. I fucking killed my only real friend when I was 9 'cause I'm a fucking coward. He stated. A coward would not admit his wrongdoing, Katsuki. Izuku stated. But you did. But why the green hair and the fake freckles? Ochako asked, interrupting the sweet exchange. Katsuki chuckled humorlessly as he held his Deku doll closer. Honestly, I suck at coping, and Izuku's dream was to go to UA and go to the hero course. That was the only thing keeping him alive, this and his mum. So, I know I'll never be a hero, not after what I did. Oh, Kachin. But he deserved to be, so I'm going to carry him. Izuku will be the hero, I'll just be his sidekick. The now Greenette explained. And I will do it with the least quirk usage ever. If possible, I'll go through it quirkless, as he would have. He spoke with conviction. But since he also liked my quirk, I'll use it only when I have no choice. He gave a sad, crooked smile. My quirk. It's like a gun, you know? It causes explosions in my hands. His smile faded somewhat. I was always told my quirk would be useful in heroics. But it's complete bullshit. He sadly spat. I mean, what the fuck am I supposed to do to get people out from a collapsed building? Blowing shit up and killing them in the process? Hell no. Both Vaishnavi looked at Katsuki with concern. Katsuki, you. I know, it's suicide. But I can't stand to hurt people anymore. And besides. He raised his red eyes, leveling the two girls with a gaze far too old for a 15-year-old. What else am I supposed to do with my life? I'm fucking useless. Those words choked Izuku, and tears gushed from her eyes and around her mask. Suddenly, Sharada, the elegant and perfect maid of the Scarlet Devil Mansion, popped in the chariot, kneeling before Deku Haim, Ochako, and Katsuki. Good evening, Haim-sama. Goodness, this late already? Haim spoke in surprise. I thought it was earlier than that. We are 6:58. Sharada informed her princess. You and your two friends already have plates in the warmer. It's a shame you won't be able to attend the Arati. I can always attend the Gora Arati. It is a vow I took. And it is a vow I will keep. Haim spoke with conviction. Yes, Haim. Also, Bakugu Prabhu. She turned her attention to the other greenette. I have the displeasure to inform you that your mother has been arrested for her link with human trafficking. Your father has been taken for questioning. Mother Sri Bhumi Devidasi is requesting that you stay with us, at least until the police can find some other relatives willing to take you in. The elegant and perfect maid inclined her head. Katsuki stared at Sharada. His whole body was shaking, and he gave a bitter smile. I have made sure none of her friends will have the ability to get her out. It is truly the end of the line for her. Sure, listen. My gran and grandpop hates my family. And I heard from my dad that they took one look at me in the maternity room. And it was the last we've ever heard of them. Katsuki said as he scratched his cheek. I don't know about Mom's parents. But the further I am from anything connected to her, the better. I see. Sharada nodded. I will still open a search for them. Take your time. I only stayed with Mom to receive all the crap I needed in Yua. We could always change your address to my home. Haim practically jumped at the chance. She felt horrible for fearing him now. It was obvious that her death had destroyed the once explosive young man. I don't know you. Why should I trust you? Because I'm your Deku. Haim tried to speak, but the words died on her lips. You may trust us, Katsuki-san, for we are servants of God. We won't look into your mail, let alone steal it. Sharada said with a gentle smile. Oh yeah, Katsuki challenged, the old spark of anger reigniting in his red eyes. How about those bomb-happy Muslim? Or those creepy priests, huh? They serve God too. Those demons and habits are just that. Demons, Haim spat, ignoring the stabbing pain in her loins. Unwilling to let this nasty stain touch the true servants of the Lord. Those who use God's names and works as a means to kill those they hate and steal. Those who use it to spread hatred and envy are, to me, future corpses left to rot on the side of the road. Their sins to be cleansed in hell only. Holy fuck, all right, calm down. Katsuki ironically tried to calm the wounded girl down. Jesus, all right? I won't lump you with those assholes. You don't seem the type, either. Well, of course not. Ochako rolled her eyes as she leaned back on her pillow. Trust me, Katsuki. We are all about the love of Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead, and respect for all others. I haven't seen any of M. Vaishnava's hatin on people. They're, like, super tolerant, humble, and meek. All right, I trust you. Katsuki rolled his eyes before his smile tried to hide again behind his usual scowl. Anyway, I'm staying in a shrine in the woods. It's pretty well hidden and shit. I can always arrange for your guardianship to be given to Moriya-sama. She and her spouse, Yakasha-sama, will keep an eye on you in case you need some assistance to reach your true potential. Something only the strongest are willing to take. The elegant, Yakuza-like maid explained. Now, I must extend to you, from Yakasha-sama, an invitation for dinner. Shirata bowed down with all respect. I dunno. Heard you guys can't spice for shit. Shirata raised her head, flames burning in her eyes. And I shall take this as a challenge. She grinned back. ~0. Later that night, after eating the spiciest veg meals ever, Katsuki had been dropped off to the old shrine in the middle of the woods, where he had called home ever since he had killed his only real friend. It was quiet and far away from the light pollution. The first nights had been rough, and he almost didn't survive his first winter until an old lady, probably a witch, helped him out with supplies and know-how. But right now, he was safe. Safe from his mom, his useless dad, his fake friends that had turned on him the moment he had been labeled a murderer. He was no hero. The true hero was Midoriya Izuku, the new inspiring hero hope. And it was where he would elevate Izuku as a Shinto god, like Toyotomi no Miko, the ancient prince of Japan turned protector deity and Buddha of carpentry, and Satoru Iwata, the god of game development and protector of the gaming industry. He put his sacred doll on the altar, and, after bowing down to Izuku Diva, went to his little kitchen. It wasn't much, but he had running water, a solar-powered fridge, and a gas stove. He went to his granary, noticing that someone had gone there, and had refilled his rice container, salt, and flour. He grinned. Deku, did you do that? He asked his god, a giddy feeling filling his heart. But instead of the usual treatment, a woman answered. No, it was me, kid. An old woman spoke, revealing her presence to Katsuki. She was curled up in the darkest corner of the room, her bare feet looking worn and clean. She wore a yellow dress that hung from one shoulder. The red and blue sleeves, one each color, looked deliberately ripped. Her long, gray, matted hair pulled around her, and her red eyes glowed through the gloom, glinting off the wicked, bow-sporting knife resting at her feet. Her thin lips spread in a smile. Name's Namuno. I'm a friend of the Hare Krishnas of Gensakayo. She introduced herself as she got up to her feet, towering above Katsuki. Her glinting red eyes pierced the boy right to his very soul. You're a good kid. Rough around the edges, and with a fuckton of trauma. But a good kid nonetheless. Then she leaned forward until she was nose to nose with the firecracker. And good kids listen to Yamanba. Don't worship your Deku if you know what's good for you. Follow Haim and her family. And for fuck's sake, kid, stop cosplaying as him. He doesn't like that. And why the fuck would I listen to you? Katsuki snapped, unable to move from the overwhelming fear the woman generated. She wasn't those fabled mountain hags that ate children and whose hearts were flowers. She was just an old vagrant. Just an old vargant, that's all. The hag chuckled like the cold winter air known to steal the lives of those too weak to endure it. Oh, kid, try as you might reject my nature, but I am what I am. Namuno waved at Katsuki as she walked out. Only her footprint remained. Once she was gone, Katsuki took his doll and put Izuku back on his altar. The fuck does she know? The dyed blonde grumbled. And Izuku answered by practically jumping off the altar, Katsuki managing to catch him at the last moment. All right then. And with that, Katsuki held Izuku to his heart and went to make them dinner, hoping that tomorrow will be a blessedly sane day. ~0. Hello? Moshi Moshi. Haim waved in front of Aoyama's support belt, and Katsuki, wearing his sensible and not deadly hero outfit loosely based on the hero costume him and his nerd had designed what seemed to be a lifetime ago, could only look forward, trying not to be related to the crazy girl by visual association, which proved to be impossible since she was floating, and intensely peering in the lens of Aoyama's support belt also. Who the fuck designed his fucking suit? His Katsuki's hag? Seriously, where was the mobility? And what about those shades? What if he fought at night? It was still, grudgingly, better than the bulky as shit armor Ida proudly wore. Waving at it and waving a card with her number on it. She was a crazy gremlin. That was not even something to be contested at all. Despite being a mad bitch, Haim knew what a good hero costume was all about. She wore a peach-colored sari tied around her waist like a pair of overalls, and the flying anchala, the extra piece used to cover the head, was tightly bound around her body. Under it was an under armor. It looked a bit flimsy at first glance, but try as he might, Katsuki could not identify what type of fabric it was made out of. For all he knew, it was super strong spider silk. Her feet were covered with socks, though, but considering that the magical girl could not stand for shit. Still, she may want to cover this later. One lost foot meant lots of blood and death. She wore a pair of heavy bangles that could definitely be used as American fist. On her wrist, her long hair was braided, and the plate was tucked in her golden belt with enough leeway that it would not prevent her head from moving, and over which was a turban that, upon closer inspection, was a helmet. Stylish and practical. Still, while it was a sane design that Katsuki could easily get behind, what she was doing to poor Twinkie Toe was. No, he didn't know here. And certainly hadn't gotten adopted if Froggy Loli's words were to be believed. Also, what was it with frogs today? First, Sue striking an oddly pleasant conversation with him to one of Haim's moms, who looked like a Froggy Loli middle schooler with a silly hat. And now this. Thankfully, the rest of the class came, and Katsuki breathed a sigh of relief. He would finally have something else to focus on than Deku Haim. Why was she called Deku Haim? There was not way that was her real name. But the alternative was even worse. And then he realized that this option was worse than watching the regal Deku Haim make a fool of herself. The hero costume of his classmates was. Holy fuck. Katsuki breathed out in pure horror as he hid Izuku's pure and unsoiled eyes from the hustle-worthy, wet, dream-inducing, made-by horny future incel outfit the girl and shitty hair were wearing. There were no words. And holy fuck, Frogger's breast. The jiggle physics. The teenager honestly feared for her back. She was already hunched over due to her frog mutation. But with what was it? 10-gallon worth of breast pendulating back and forth with every hop she took. And the son of a bitch felt an overwhelming amount of sympathy for her trapezius and Cooper's ligament. And her back and neck. Poor frog girl. And then Katsuki added that back to the rest of the lady schoolmates. Ponytail looked like a slut. And why the fuck did she carry a whole all-book rack on her back? What the hell that they managed to pass that by the board? Didn't they have a rule made in place after Midnight's old costume got rejected? Because it was a homage to the nudist beach get-up from Kill La Kill. For crying out loud, Ponytail was from a respected family. Rich people with only one child cause their eldest didn't survive a kidnapping. So why the fuck did they let their purebred pony run around to UA to become a hero, the most dangerous job in the world, wearing only 2 pieces of fabric and a cape, for crying out loud? Unless, oh Deku no, just. Why were rich people so utterly disgusting? Round face was alright at a glance. But why did she wear high heels? And, oh god, Katsuki could see her, camel toe where he stood. And then, he noticed the gloves and boots. Gloves and boots. No body to be seen, just gloves and Ghosty. Ghosty was naked. There was a rule against that. The midnight rule. Katsuki just wanted to return to his shrine and cry to Izuku in peace. Modern society had gone crazy. Absolutely bonkers. And the blonde wanted nothing to do with it. Oh, by Draupadi's unlimited sorry. He heard Haim whisper in shocked horror behind her mask. This is unacceptable. Finally, something Katsuki could agree with the Izuku look-alike. Ochako, who was on the verge of tears, threw herself in Izu. No, Deku Haim's arms, sobbing now that she was with her friend. I know. I feel so exposed, and the fabric. It's just spandex. I look like a slut. She wailed. Froggy nodded as she supported her heavy breasts with her hands, wincing in pain while Momo covered herself with her cape, holding it close and crossing her legs in clear discomfort. The only one who looked unaffected was Ghosty. But what's wrong with being naked? Nobody can see me anyway. I can see you. Deku Haim deadpanned, her mask now that of a pretty Hanya woman with horns, perfectly rendering her mood. Whomever made this no mask was obviously highly skilled. Why you can? Your legs are unshaven. It looks like they have frosted over. You have knife marks on your thighs. Some are from this morning, for blood is still weeping from them. One of your breasts is markedly smaller than the other, and your hair is long, white and matted. This caused the rest of the class to gasp. I have a few friends who have a similar type of invisibility you have, and I'm sure they would gladly teach you how to turn it off, as long as you don't mind doing some silly and somewhat dangerous pranks on people. Deku Haim informed the not-so-invisible girl, ignoring All Might's attempt to get back in control. Nevertheless, as the Princess of Japan, I cannot, in good conscience, let any of you go out to perform any exercise, let alone combat, looking like dressed-up whores. She huffed as she dug into her Kevlar vest and pulled out her phone. Miss Moria, All Might boomed with all authority. I request you put your phone away and stop disrupting my class. If it truly were your class, you Ophi, you would have used your underused brain and checked all of their costumes for flaws and hazards. And isn't there a rule against women showing too much skin? The midnight ratio. The overly tall and muscled man's falters, and sweat beads on his head. Ah well, there is no such rule. Bullshit. Katsuki blustered, having reached the limit of bullshit he could take in a day. My parents worked in the fashion industry for years, and everyone there and their mom knows about the fucking midnight ratio. Indeed. But my parents told me to ignore it since, you know, it was only for whorish women. Ponytail squeaked the end of her sentence, hiding her face despite her blush, having traveled all the way to her navel. Nevertheless, Haim pointedly said, I can let any of you do anything dressed like that, or undressed like that, or with a sick mind. Hey, my mind's just fine. Deku Haim ignored the self-harmer fuck. What the hell was wrong with people? And instead approached Ponytail, her crutches clacking resolutely on the ground. My boy, if you keep disrupting the class, then I will have no choice but to send you to the principal. All Might boomed, and many students moved back from the fearsome-looking #1 hero. Yo, not cool. Kaminari spoke up to protect his fellow LGBTQ+ equal sign fellow from an insensitive prick. Same with Kirishima, who had lost all respect for All Might in this one statement, calling him super unmanly. Not that it was hard for him, since his heart and soul had been sold decades ago to the gallant hero, Crimson Riot. But neither All Might nor Deku Haim gave them any thought, for their voice was drowned by All Might's ego and Haim's purpose. She stood in front of the Yaoyorozu heiress. O scion of the Yaoyorozu, may I request a looking glass? She humbly asked with folded hands. What now? A looking glass, specifically one that is put above a foyer so one may see what's behind him. Haim explained before putting a hand to her chin, mumbling how a bar-grade looking glass may be better since it would allow for more people to pass through. Moria, All Might growled as he stalked toward the smaller woman, his hand reaching to make a grab at her arm when he froze, seemingly forgetting what he was about to do. Moria-sen, maybe we should listen to our teacher, Ponytail asked as she held her arms against her body. eyeing the grape-headed freak warily, and for good reason. That little piece of purple shit was eyeing her, as if she was a piece of meat. And oh, Katsuki wanted to blast the stain off from the mortal realm, but he had made a vow. He managed to catch the grapist's glance, and summoning his most fearsome scowl, Katsuki cowed the pervert without a single word. You mess with him. You mess with me. Thankfully, Katsuki's carefully curated presence was all it took to make the ugly grape turn white and know his fucking position. As it should. Honestly, this man is no teacher yet, and if he were a real teacher, the first thing he would do is to make sure what we wear are appropriate for fighting, and he would have us do simple exercises like Parker or simple sparring, not an advanced battle simulation with high stakes and the risk of death hanging above our collective heads. The greenette regally condemned. Now, please, I need this looking glass, and you stay right there, I know your secret. She threatened the symbol of peace, standing to her full height. Don't make me reveal it to the world, you old goat. All Might paled noticeably, and Ponytail managed to produce a decently sized looking glass using the length of her armpit and ankle. Round Face helping her get the piece of glass out to the sound of Deku Heim, darkening the page of a notebook at a pace only Izuku could. No, you motherfucking idiot. What the hell is wrong with you? He's dead. You killed him. All right. Not the easiest thing to make, Momo mumbled to herself. This will have to be taken into consideration for your other costume. I wonder, when you make something, if you could fold it like the wings on an earwig and unfold it on the way out so you could make bigger things. Or just learn how to fight with a lance and halberd. Maybe you could make a gun that circumvents the Japanese law. Or, Heim shook her head. Sorry, my mouth tends to run away from me when it comes to quirks, she said as she approached the mirror. Katsuki averted his eyes from the reflective surface, unable to look at himself. Who would be able to look at a monster? Save ignorant people and other monsters. Aljith, Deku. Heim spoke as she pressed a hand on the surface, making the glass rippled like water. The rest of the class oohed and awed at the sight. Even Katsuki could not help his bottom lips divorcing with his top one. And then, a blonde woman half emerged from its now liquid surface, causing a type of subdued panic to sweep among his classmates. Yes, Heim-chan, what may I do for you? She asked. Holy crap. O Segnirer, quel est brilliant. Dark revelry of darkness. Pretty. Hello, Achuta Gopi. I hope I'm not taking your precious time away from your project. Heim greeted her. If you would, I would not have answered, Achiuta replied before her eyes fell on the gaggle of girls and took an honest to Izuku double take. Oh, I see why you have contacted me, Heim-chan. The blonde, let's call her Alice, spoke after having recovered from seeing that. Jokes that were the girls' hero costumes, and some of the boys, too. Also, Earjack looked way too casual to be safe, and raccoon eyes. Welp, she was a hip-hop dancer and wore straight-up dancewear that had gone out of style centuries ago. It was honestly painful to look at. Alice walked out of the looking glass, followed by around 50 blonde dolls, all carrying sewing material like scissors, tape measures, and Alice's ancient sewing machine. Damn. This must be one of those old, mythical mechanical singers. This was honestly Katsuki's wet dream, despite his dad not doing much in his life. Masaru had managed to give his son a passion for sewing, something the hag never accepted. And bolts upon bolts of fabric and ribbons of all colors. Let's get started, shall we? Heim, you've analyzed their quirks in depth, have you now? Alice asked as other dolls made partitions, while others immobilized All Might with magic circles. I don't know if I should get mad that you had to ask. The green doll-like girl jokingly scowled as she handed the other blonde 4 binders. Those are the short versions. I left the integral work with Purnamasi. Brave of you to think they are safe from the thieving rat, my friend. Brave of you to think I am not friends with said thieving rat. Alice boggled at Heim, all flying dolls freezing in place. And, What has she stolen from you? It was not the most precious, I hope? Who said she's stolen everything? Haim shot back. Remember, we worship the greatest of thieves, and your thief knows how to bow to his lotus feet. Ah, was the only thing out of Alice's mouth as she returned her full attention to her flying dolls. A few had floated in the vicinity, and from the smell of them, it wasn't fluff that filled them or sand. The fuck? Who's the mad-ass, poo-brained dickwad who thought filling dolls with gunpowder was a good idea? I did. Texas is the best to take care of a recalcitrant pest. Alice answered without much of a flinch or tension on her shoulder. Knowing he had just insulted a master designer and a dangerous doll maker, Katsuki shut his trap and made himself as small as possible, deeply desiring to sink into the ground and away from yet another mad blonde. At least she was more pleasant to be around than his old hag. 30 minutes later, everyone had an improved hero costume, even Haim. Ochako now wore a gray dress and galaxy-themed leggings, probably armored. There was enough room to move, and the dress was barely below the knee. It was decorated with different planets, 10 of them. To be exact, must be from an ass-backwards village, since Pluto and the fucking sun were there. And all had a different weight. A circle of stars rested upon her head, and a pair of ear decorations, no, not dangly earrings, thank Deku, finished her look. She looked less like a hero and more like a magical girl. And she looked adorable, marketable. And Katsuki hoped he would never find out if the Venus on her skirt were as heavy as it claimed, nor if the miniature sun looked as hot as it claimed. Tsu was also adorable in her raincoat-inspired hero suit. She even had a leaf-shaped umbrella and spiked galoshes. Those things looked painful to be kicked with. Ponytail wore an over-engineered gym bra and shorts. A long teal coat covered her body, and her feet were clad in combat boots. A sutra scroll scrolled in front of her eyes. And while many would think this was not better than her last outfits, there was a reason for that. The gym outfit was hidden under a glamour spell interwoven in the bra, giving her the appearance of being clad in heavy armor up to her head, hiding the true nature of her quirk. Also, despite the armor being an illusion, Yaoyorozu had the benefit of such armor, and the mobility and visibility of a skimpy outfit. Actually, everyone now wore a protective enchantment tied to tiny doll talismans. Okuda had even enspelled Katsuki's Deku with the same thing, smiling bemusedly at the other greenette, yet remaining cryptically silent over the whole affair. Hagakure Toru was the one with the most change. She wore a pastel bodysuit with a cowl and skirt. A crystalline staff was held in her hand. Her skin was darker than most, and her hair was spilling out of the cowl, somewhat highlighting the delicate spray of freckle on her nose. Her boots and gloves were still present, though, since those were of good craftsmanship. And I'm having another mental health counseling session with Miss Savitri, Hagakure admitted as she stood close to Deku Haim. She's scary, but I trust her. She's kind, even if you can't hide anything from her. Which is a good thing dealing with suicidal teenagers and people suffering from other mental ailment. But depression's a myth. Yaoyorozu spoke up, barely above a whisper. And you will all have to see her then. Deku Haim chimed as she made a few mental notes to talk to Saviti about injecting mental Amrita in her classmates. All right, everyone's proper. And you look awesome, Jiru-san. Kick ass. Jiru gave her thumbs up, showing a pair of palm-sized, super subwoofer for the heart bass cannons. Wearing a clear homage to Gensakayo's premier screamo group, the Divine Lioness. We can proceed with the class, she informed All Might, who looked rather miffed by the 30 minutes wasted on gear improvement. If this is the case. He gritted through his teeth as he managed to hang a very fake smile, causing quite a few students to take a step back, save for Todoroki, Haim-chan, and Ochako. Then let us start class. Zygotes. Tilde 0 tilde. Later that evening, Ochako, Haim, and Katsuki returned home after their first day of class, laughing all the while at the sight of All Might crying on a very understanding Aizawa's shoulders. The reason? And ya made it fly, you fucking mad gal, made it spin. Ochako howled as she held onto Katsuki for support, despite the young man not being in any better condition, holding his stomach as the image of the symbol of peace just being fucking done too good not to laugh at. Haim, who was wiping her tears and recovering from her uncontrollable laughter, finally spoke once her gales abated. I heard stories about how Kijin-san made an entire castle flip upside down to try to stop Ravati. But it didn't do anything, she somehow managed to explain. Despite her cheek hurting from her laughter, I got inspired. He looked. Katsuki wheezed. He looked so done. Think we'll see him at school tomorrow? Ochako asked, ignoring a gaggle of old ladies whispering about high school delinquents from UA, no less. Fuck if I know. Does UA work with contracts? Could he even break it? Katsuki asked with genuine curiosity as he held his Deku. I second that fuck if I know. Hey, I got an idea. Let's see how fast we can get All Might to quit. No. Haim cut them off, all her mirth gone. No matter how new he is at teaching, we should not force him to throw in the towel. It would reflect poorly on the school, us, All Might himself, and Vaishnavism. I may have been hard on him today, but as a princess, my duty is to ensure that all are following the rules and all are given the protection they need, may it be material, mental, emotional, or spiritual. Hopefully, this will be the only time I'll ever have to flex my rank. I'd rather not make an enemy of All Might. Not this soon, anyway. Suddenly, the seriousness of the situation took hold of the three teens. Right. It's ain't just me now. It's a whole community. Ochako murmured as the weight of what she was and the consequence of acting like a careless teen would ensue. Do I count? Katsuki asked. I mean, I didn't join. I kinda got adopted. You are still a part of our group. While you are considered a far-fringe devotee, your actions will also reflect on us. Of course, if you want to live away from us, then you may. No one is forcing you to, Atsuki. Oops, she's almost called him Kaken. The usually explosive boy bit his lips as he took inner counsel from his Izuku plush, causing Haim plenty of mixed feelings. She may not remember Katsuki much, but she knew he had a mean streak growing up, and Izuku used to be the main target of his affection. But the young man she saw now, taciturn, still rude, but less explosive, instead of being like shaken nitroglycerin, Kachin reminded Haim of thermite. Instead of exploding loudly, he smoldered bright, the heat generated being the highest of all combustion. She just hoped he was heat-proof. Is this an invitation for dinner? 'Cause I don't think whatever managed to grow in my garden's gonna cut it anymore. And I'm fucking starving, he admitted. And just give me some time. All right. I ain't used to people being nice to me. And the street became alive with the sound of two heartbreaking. Hey, it's fine, Bakugo-san. We ain't gonna force you. Ya had enough o' that growing up. No shit. As Katsuki and Ochako bonded over their lack of resources in Haim, Izuku felt the presence of a restless spirit, still in the flesh, coming from the front porch of the Todoroki estate. And indeed, there, standing in front of the gate, hair wild and filthy, mummified flesh mixed with healthy one, held only by staples and spite it seemed. He smelled of smoke and illness, and numerous evil spirits inhabited his gross body, affecting his mind and whispering words of hatred, fueling a blaze that had the will and ability to scorch down villages. Izuku's heart was already melting for the poor soul, and thus she quickly approached him. Excuse me, I would like to help you, she began, not letting the fettered spirit any room to escape her. I live nearby, and I would. Fuck off, he growled, his voice fire damaged. I don't want to do shit with any neighbor of Endeavor's. I wouldn't call myself a neighbor to this old fart. Haim quipped. I know who you are, and your anger against your father is valid, but not against all of them. That would be foolish. She gently scolded. Nobody has ever asked to be born, let alone be born to be a thing instead of a person. The scarred man, whose azure eyes held madness, opened his mouth to protest when Kakila-chan hit the back of his head with a paper fan. Not that anyone would remember her actions. Rendered mute by his realization, Taoya was led by Haim to her home. Ochako and Katsuki followed, warily watching the ghoul-like man being led by the Princess of Chaos. He knew he'd lost his marbles years ago when he saw Izuku dressed in a kimono and limping around with a broad smile on his face and smiling and joking around with a ridiculously tall blonde woman wearing a mob cap and a purple dress. He had gained this vision as he looked through the crack in the floor of the shrine Izuku had died in. Yeah, so seeing a bunch of honest boisterously singing this Hare Krisha Hare Rama song in the altar room really wasn't worth his precious energy. Besides, there was still school tomorrow.